The direct market is the system by which we all get to enjoy our physical floppy comics, for which some of us are grateful. And throughout last week, we dove pretty deep into the history of the direct market, and we established the origins, we established the people who helped bring it to life and who made it what it was at the time, created a system that still stands today, uh 40 plus 50 years later, actually. Today, we're going to take a look at the high of the direct market, the biggest and best time in the history of this system. We're going to talk about the 80s, but we're also going to talk about the 90s. We're talking the boom and the bust of the direct market on today's installment of the direct market deep dive. And to do that, we have our wonderful cast. As always, we've got Cale,
What's up, hot dogs?
Marco,
Don't boom on me.
Tyler.
Hi guys. Hello. How's it going?
I thought Tyler was going to say don't bust on me.
That's what I was setting him up for.
I
but
I didn't want to. I thought about it, and I didn't want to.
he always thinks
Howard.
about it.
You know what? Nope. I almost followed up, but something else. Not gonna do it.
I'm Sean. Thanks for being here, whether you are live or in the future. I see a bunch of you already in the chat, which is always nice. You guys had a wonderful pre-pals session. I know that. Pre-pals is a thing that happens on our Discord server before this show goes live. There's like another show going on, but it's for you by you on our Discord server. It's very cool.
It's like some Comics Pals podcast foreplay, really.
Yeah.
Kind of gets
Yeah.
you going. Yeah.
And the motor's revving. Shout out to Electrics this week.
They're pre-palling hard over there.
Very.
What's up, Grayson Red, Kurt Wildshut? Good to see you both. Marley, glad you made it, Marley. Munster Design. Marley, how's the vision? Is everything back to normal? You good?
I was like, what happened? The show isn't out yet. Vision Quest hasn't even started production yet. Do they know something we don't know? But yes, Marley, hello.
Nathan Chaffin says, "What a beautiful topic for discussion." I'm glad you feel that way. I think so too. I am I don't even know what's going on in the current direct market. I am so obsessed with the 1980s and the mid to late 70s.
Ooh.
And I just feel like I need to get all this out. So let's jump into it, shall we? The direct market is generally accepted to have begun with Phil Seuling convincing the major publishers at the time to sign distribution agreements with him to get comics directly into stores. However, both Marvel and DC would undergo difficult years in the mid 70s. DC's well documented implosion rocked the company, but Marvel struggled as well, with their Pizzazz magazine flopping, lasting only 2 years from 1977 to 79, coupled with their flagging comic sales due to quality issues. Now, I don't know a lot about 70s Marvel comics, but in research for this, I found that there were a lot of people who were around comics at that time who said that Marvel's struggles largely were due to the fact that the books just weren't very good. Um, and there was an issue from that standpoint. The Pizzazz magazine, I I I I looked into it. It lasted about 2 years, and they put a whole boatload of resources behind it, and it completely flopped.
What was it? Was it like a Tiger Beat type thing, or was it?
Uh, it was kind of like a it was kind of like a it was realistically they just wanted to put a magazine out. They really wanted to have a magazine out, and they put some top creators behind it. And there were like comic book stories in it. It was aimed towards, young people, kids, as most stuff was at the time. Um, it just seemed like something the market didn't need Not the direct market, just the market for comics. Didn't really need it.
And this would have been Marvel with Stanley at the head still, 70s.
Yeah, so at this time, Stanley is looking to leave.
Yeah.
Oh.
He's trying to move to the West Coast. At this time, Marvel. Well, even today, Marvel's business is in New York, and Stan didn't want to be stuck anymore in New York. He wanted to broaden his horizons. He's not the only person from Marvel who would feel this way and take that step, but it was a huge transition, and Marvel had a leadership struggle because um, Stan wanted out. Stan was already trying to get out and trying to find someone to usurp him, and so it was a revolving door for a while. Um, there were other people who stepped up and didn't find a ton of success in that role. It wasn't until Jim Shooter that there was some consistency in the space, but Marvel was beginning to be run by the higher ups, the executives, marketing, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the marketing side of things. And that's one of the most interesting things that I came to learn throughout this deep dive is that even at this point, which is something we've talked about more recently, even at this point, Marvel uh, marketing has a big role to play in what gets published and what doesn't.
You telling me they put marketing into comics?
Yeah.
He's
I don't know
telling you
about
they
that.
put marketing outside of comics.
Now that I don't believe.
Oh, well.
So while the big two are struggling at this time, the direct market is not. This is an idea that has caught on like wildfire, and there's a ton of success behind it. Within 6 years between 1974 and 1980, there was a huge period of growth. And in particular between 79 and 82, things opened up dramatically once Marvel started to offer other distributors the same terms that Phil Seuling and Seagate were getting. Um, so we talked last week about how Phil Seuling had this idea to reach out to the big four publishers at the time and sort of say, hey, we need to get comics into these shops, these hobby shops that have opened up that are all comics based. We need to get new comics into them. Remember, the direct market originally, comic shops, I should say, originally were created really to be back issue vehicles more than anything. It was Phil's idea to get new comics into these shops. But what he also did was say, hey, I want the best deal. Give me the best distribution deal, and I'll handle the rest. Well, a lot of people complained, including Chuck Rosansky, who was a retailer turned distributor, who said, "Hey, this is bullshit. We should be able to get these kinds of terms, and we can do big business too." Marvel at some point agreed to that. And we talked about how the government came down on Phil Seuling and there were other factors. Marvel said, hey, we're going to open up our floodgates to any distributor who wants to do business with us and not have Seuling and Seagate as the middle person. All you had to do was be able to order $3,000 worth of Marvel Comics to get a 60% discount, free shipping, and other perks as a Marvel distributor.
60%. Damn, that's deep.
60%. Because remember, now through the direct market, all publishers are getting the full amount into their pocket. There is no more returnability. There's no returnability in the direct market. So even though they're offering a deep discount, every dollar and cent of what they are going to get, they are guaranteed.
It's in the green anyway. Yeah.
Yeah.
Damn.
But think about that. $3,000 and you're in the clear, but you got to order a lot because these comics are still 25 cents.
Is there
Go
some?
ahead, Tom.
I see
That's
Marco
a
doing the
lot.
quick math there.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a massive number. Marvel's
Oh, there we
faced.
go. Yep.
12,000 issues.
Now, again, these are distributors. They're not retailers. So, of course,
Okay.
there's a lot, you want to service all your retail shops and things like that. But what happened, due almost entirely to Marvel's decision making at this particular time, uh, it created a massive boom for the direct market because not only are there now distributors popping up all over the place because they can get in the game through Marvel, but there are comic book shops popping up all over the place. So there are new comic shops and distributors to service them. The market is booming. Phil Seuling is no longer gatekeeping by saying, "Hey, you have to pay us up front." I don't know if you guys remember, but the deal was sub distributors had to pay him upfront cash on their books, which is nuts. But that's what was happening. Um, so here's a quote that I wanted to share from Chuck Rosansky of Mile High Comics. He did an absolutely brilliant um, sort of accounting, a history of his association with the direct market. He is definitely a name you should know of people who had an impact on the direct market. Like I said, he went to Marvel directly and said, "Hey guys, there are some things you've got to change. And one of them is you got to let us play ball with you. Get rid of Phil Seuling as the gatekeeper." And Marvel said, "Okay." Um, so this is a quote from him from his website, milehighcomics.com. The impact of the sudden surge in growth cannot be underestimated. Because I had such a personal vested interest in the growth trends of the direct market, during the early 1980s, I quizzed everyone at Marvel who would give me figures as to what impact comic shops were having on the sales of the company. I derived the following estimate numbers specifically from conversations with Jim Shooter, Ed Shukin, Michael Hobson, and Carol Kalish. Ed Shukin was the president at Marvel, I believe, at the time, and Carol Kalish is a name that we're going to dive deeper into a little bit later, but she was a marketing person at Marvel, and she was very, very bright, um, and she understood the direct market in a way that a lot of other people at Marvel didn't, because it's a new thing, and she was a young person. She was she would have been at this particular time in her early 30s. She was very young and very connected to comics culture at the time. So in 1979, the direct market was 6% of Marvel's gross sales. A lot of that was coming from Phil Seuling. In 1982, the direct market was 20% of Marvel's gross sales. That's already a 14% growth in 3 years of how important the direct market was to Marvel. By 85, they were 50% of Marvel's gross sales. By 87, just 2 years later, 70% of Marvel's gross sales.
Holy shit.
What's the rest?
10
So
years?
that's a 7 year period.
Yo, that's at least like 10% a year. That's crazy.
Yeah, crazy, dramatic. Um, and that other remaining 30% is the direct market. They're going to lose, or I'm sorry, the newsstand market. They're going to lose almost all of that by 93. By 93, newsstand is basically irrelevant to the sales of Big Two comics. All comics, really. He would go on to say, while the exact figures may vary slightly from my derived estimates, the fact remains that Marvel's choosing to open up their distribution system to new entrants in 1979 and providing working capital at the same time turned out to be the turning point in the history of the company. In fact, if you consider the expansion in market share by the direct market was paralleled by the simultaneous collapse of the newsstand business, it becomes clear that Marvel Comics would not have survived the 1980s without the robust growth in comics specialty shops.
Yeah, yeah, that was a full-on adaptation. Market shift. Yeah, Hmm. I wonder if, in that case, had it never shifted over, not that it wouldn't have died out, but the growth, the year-on-year growth that they saw would not have been anything like that. And there wouldn't even been a need for Phil at that point.
Was this news to Marvel? Like when he brought this to them?
So Marvel, it's important to know that Marvel had a lot of upheaval around this time, and there were a lot of the older veteran comic book creators and um not executives, but like editors and art directors and just those kinds of people who were veterans had shifted away from Marvel. On top of the fact that the direct market is still in its infancy. If this is 79, when Chuck goes to Marvel, the direct market only became a thing in 73, really. So nobody knows what it is. Jim Shooter, though, who at this time had just gotten his position as editor in chief, I believe, at Marvel.
He
Um,
was 13.
yeah, he knew what the direct market was. And so, because he knew what it was, uh, he was receptive to what Chuck was saying. And so, the short answer to your question is uh, it wasn't absolutely unheard of by the people at Marvel. They didn't realize how important it was until now, basically. And Hayden's hideout, I think it was it Hayden. Let me see. Somebody pointed out the numbers about this, saying that
Oh,
$3,000.
was the 60% discount? Yeah, that was
Yeah,
Hayden's Hideout. 60% off of the 3,000 would be $1,200. So you'd effectively be
It
paying what is it, for every 100 issues? Because if the threshold was $3,000 at 25 cents, you're ordering 12 12,000 issues. That means that gets cut from 25 cents to 10 cents a comic.
so yes, so my belief, if I understand it correctly, is you have to order $3,000 worth of comics with that discount in mind. I
yeah,
think
that's probably what it is. Yeah,
so. You have to get all the way up there from the discount.
which they probably wouldn't have too much of a problem with because back issues are so big at this time.
Well,
Yeah, but Marvel's not selling you back issues.
right. It would be, if anything, it might be harder only because you have to convince people to come in for the new issue rather than the back issue. But unless they're
Okay.
locked in, actually, and this is something that I was thinking about, unless they're locked into the ecosystem, which was new at the time, it's harder to sell people new books than older comics readers who maybe want to fill in their collection because they don't know that this is the place necessarily to go pick up the new issue of whatever. They're used to the newsstand. It takes time to shift the habit and shift the mindset.
My thinking was having to buy 12,000 issues meant that they will have back issues, which they're fine with because they're not going to sell
Oh,
out
Oh, I
of
see.
12,000. Yeah, they're not going to sell you
Gotcha.
directly back issues, but having that overstock is something they know how to sell at this point.
yes. 6% of Marvel's gross sales in 1979 come from the direct market. Zero of those dollars would have been coming to them before that, as it relates to new comics,
Uh,
because the back issue market was the only thing the direct market or the only thing comic shops were about.
Sean, did you use Marketplace at all as a resource? Um,
I have not.
okay, I was just curious because I've been doing some ancillary reading, and there were a resource that popped up that I listened to otherwise, but
Oh,
never mind.
okay. If you've got anything to share, feel free.
Okay,
Uh,
nerd.
I'm doing the homework, guys.
Oh, jeez. You didn't collect the homework.
That was me. That literally was me.
I bet.
Ring the
Yeah,
bell. The
yeah, we
bell
know you
ring.
do it every week.
um, I mentioned that Marvel was having a lot of problems in the 70s. And the thing that actually saved Marvel, this is a little bit of a it's a tale from the direct market, not necessarily essential to our story, but I think it's worth sharing. What saved Marvel and arguably DC as well is actually Star Wars, believe it or not. So when Star Wars came out, there wasn't necessarily an understanding of how big it was going to be. It wasn't Star Wars yet, right? So there wasn't a lot of stuff to buy that was Star Wars related whenever the movie came out. It happened to be the case that comic book shops had a ton of Star Wars stuff. They had Star Wars comics, the Star Wars #1 that came out. That was that hit, it sold 1 million copies. It was a massive, massive success. One of the first, if not the first, if it's not the first, it's absolutely one of the very first comics ever to be reprinted. That was not a thing.
Interesting.
But because if you could walk into 50,000 other kinds of stores and they didn't have anything Star Wars, but comic shops did. They
Yeah.
had posters, they had magazine, they had comics, they had all kinds of shit that nobody else had. So this set people flooding to find what Marvel was offering.
Even that first issue came out almost a month before the movie came out,
Right.
and that's why the art on it looks like nothing like the movie.
They didn't know. They didn't know yet.
Darth Vader is green. Okay.
Have a rabbit.
Okay. Don't hate on Jackson, Marco. All right.
So Star Wars saved comics in a roundabout way.
And it will again once that Marvel Star Wars crossover comes out when they need to break the emergency glass.
Well, you could even argue that not necessarily that Star Wars saved Marvel in 2015, but that they helped, bolster what Marvel was doing at the time.
They definitely like to show that stat.
Yeah. Thank you to Atomic Hound for kicking us off with the super chats today. 1999 support from Atomic Hound. The early 80s were revolutionary in how comics were made, marketed, distributed, and consumed. Content matured rapidly at Marvel first and then exploded once DC caught on to the act. A great time to be a comic fan, like now. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, Atomic Hound, and I agree.
The whole era is marked by the indie comics of like Dark Horse, new publishers popping up, the Elementals, like there's so many comics coming out of that era, but it's interesting to think that that was at a time where because of the access to distribution, you could just get a set order of books out, uh, probably within small local areas.
Yep.
Hmm.
Um,
Uh,
before we stray too far from the Star Wars piece, I've been finally started reading Starhawks, Gil Kane and Ron Goulart, and one of the things that they mentioned was there was still newspaper syndication at the time for comics, and as these guys worked on this kind of book, sci-fi, space opera, etc., it was put to the wayside maybe like 4 or 5 years until the release of Star Wars, and then everybody and their mother's like, what do we have that can be a parallel or can kind of jump on the bandwagon of? And so they ended up releasing this, and this became like a full time for Gil Kane, leaving Marvel to work on this, and then Ron Goulart just continuing to do his writing in the sci-fi world. So there was lasting effects and reverberations off of the comics and the material because they mentioned that as well. Those are the only places you can go get those things, and so people were locked into comics, sci-fi comics, and even better yet, like space operatic sci-fi comics.
think about how important sci-fi comics would become just off the fact that they couldn't do all those other genres. Like they couldn't do horror, they couldn't do crime.
Yeah.
Romance was limited because of potential sexual content. So sci-fi was really one of the only genres you could dive deeply into. We talked about Marvel and how they've approached the direct market. It didn't take long for them to really start to acknowledge it, as I just broke down. Um, they had a bright idea, though. Let's hit the direct market with an exclusive comic. And that led to Dazzler #1. Something that a lot of people are familiar with by now, being the very first direct market exclusive comic book from Marvel Comics. For that reason, Dazzler #1 is legendary. I have no idea if it's good or not, but it came out in 1980, at the very tail end of 1980, December, and it was a pretty big hit. Now, according to Jim Shooter, it sold 428K copies. I personally, in my research, have seen numbers as high as 480K, so I don't know where the truth lies. But it's somewhere in that range. That's not a crazy differential. Now, that number is not the million copies sold, 2 million copies sold that almost every comic was doing 10, 20 years prior, 30 years prior. The reason why that number matters so much, I mean, it's obviously very high. If a comic book did 480K sales today, I'd be waving all kinds of flags right now, right? But the reason why that's such a big deal for Marvel is because every dollar and cent of that is going to them. It's a guaranteed sale.
Mm.
Newsstand, you had to print 3 to make 1. You had to make the assumption
Yeah, yeah.
that 2 out of 3 of those sales were coming back to you. They weren't going to sell through. All of these 400 plus sales are sold through. Money made.
Minimized back issue, right? Because then, or I guess, never mind. You had the returnability, right? So it doesn't matter. Never mind.
There's no returnability on this.
But I'm saying previously you would have had
Oh,
it,
yeah.
so it wouldn't have mattered because you just
Right.
whatever you
Yeah.
sell, right? Like
Now
there
you
would
sell it. It's not your problem anymore.
right, right. Like there would have been 600, 700K in circulation, and only the 400 whatever wouldn't have come back.
Right. And at this time, there are still about somewhere in the range of 1,500 comic book shops. So that they sold that amount within that relatively small ecosystem. So that's pretty good. DC for their part put out a Superboy comic as their first direct market offering. Not nearly as storied. From what I read, that comic had a lot of like reprinted material and shit like that people weren't that enthused about.
Huh. Interesting. Well, I wonder if that's that sort of, like we were saying Jim Shooter knew about it, right? So on the ground floor, like he was ready to support it. Whereas I wonder if DC was a bit more like, let's see where this goes.
They absolutely were.
Yeah.
100%. Yep. It took them slightly, not that much, but slightly longer to kind of get on the ball with that. Now, for DC's part, they wanted to get into the game of switching things up with how they handled distributors, but their strategy was very deadly. Very, very deadly. So in 1981, DC pulled a bait and switch on comic distributors. So what they did was they said to all the retailers who wanted in with DC, which was a lot. They got in with Marvel relatively easily, $3,000 get in price. DC had yet to allow distributors to get in with them other than Phil. So they invite them all to this massive conference. I think it might have even been it was in San Diego, I believe. And they say, "Yeah, come on down. We're going to announce our strategy." So they go down. Then they all get a call. And the call says, "Yeah, you know what? We're not going to do that big meeting actually. What we're going to do is we're going to call all the distributors who we want to do business with, and we'll tell you the terms of what the deals are going to be." So they established X amount of distributors as DC distributors, meaning these were the only distributors in North America who were allowed to carry DC product. And every other one that wasn't chosen had to sub distribute through these top distributors. That's brutal.
That's fucked. Yo, DC's had a history of just being like, yeah, actually, we're gonna go do this. Fuck you
Yeah, I
guys.
was gonna say, sound familiar?
Yeah, yeah.
The DC stands for doesn't care. They're gonna do what they want.
They didn't give a fuck. And that sucks because now sub distribution is not a weird concept at this time, but it is a brutal one because it means that your competitors are getting better um, margins than you are. Their rates are better than yours. They're getting higher percentages off of comics. So you you know if they're getting 60% off, let's say, from DC, and you are only getting 40, 50% off from your distributor that you are sub distributing from, that's a 10 to 20% difference in the discount that you are getting. That's pretty sizable.
I wonder how that affects the retailer then, because let's say you get caught in the crossfire of my distributor is not a DC distributor. Now they have to sub distribute, right? What happens there? Who eats the cost? Because the price is printed on the page, right? You can't change that. So now your percentage gets smaller. Now you're at risk, and maybe you get a preference for, actually, Marvel's a bit cooler with me. I'm gonna focus more on Marvel books or other books than a DC.
Possible, but at this time, this is just my supposition. At this time, there are so many distributors that it's a very competitive space. So in my mind, you ask the question, who eats the cost? I would say it's the distributor that does.
Mm,
Because as a retailer, you still have other options. You have the ability to choose who you get your books from. There are tons of possibilities.
Kurt Wildshut in the chat says comics business used to be so melodramatic, getting people on the phone to kill Jason Todd. This shit.
I think it still is. I think it
Apparently,
still is.
yeah.
It
we're
is. Yeah.
we're in the midst of the melodrama.
Yeah. I love it because it's messy, but it's beautiful. It's a beautiful mess. Uh Quick reminder to smash the like button if you're enjoying the show so far.
Smash.
Atomic Hound was gracious enough to hit us with a super chat. They are open, so any that we get, we are very happy to receive. Thank you guys for being here. Really appreciate you. So this is a quote from Paul Levitz, who shared his thoughts on how DC was changing in the early days of the direct market. So for DC, you start to see our line change, and you start to we start dropping out titles that are profitable, but we're totally aimed at the newsstand because we know they won't be profitable in a couple of years. So the mystery books start disappearing, the war books start thinning out. We're introducing instead more titles that are, from a content standpoint, aimed at the audience we're seeing in the comic shops. Jeanette Kahn goes talent hunting. Frank Miller is the most interesting creator in the business. She brings him on to do Ronin. She had the courage to allow him to do a really radical take on Batman at that point. She also puts a lot of energy into recruiting a lot of the British talent, and that leads to interesting things like Watchmen. And that comes from Paul Levitz, who did an interview with ICV2.com. Paul Levitz, a genius in comics. He was, I think he was editor in chief at this time. So We have talked about Jeanette Kahn in the history of the DC Comics implosion deep dive. Jeanette Kahn is one of the heroes of comics, one of the heroes of DC Comics, and her bright idea was to bring on a lot of this talent from overseas, these writers who were brilliant and were doing great stuff in Europe's thriving comics market, and brought them on to do that same stuff over here. Um, she lured them with creator ownership and better contracts. That's what brought the boys to the yard in those years. Were it not for that, we probably never get Alan Moore, uh, Grant Morrison, and a lot of those other creators who would come on and do, such amazing things.
The lads to the yard, as it were.
The lads, sure.
Yo, taking our jobs, dude.
Wow. Hey, they were doing it better. Well, some of them.
Hey, shout out to Jamie Delano.
Uh, Another quick quote from Paul, as far as we could tell, we were dealing with an audience of 16 to 25-year-olds, well educated, fairly prosperous, mostly urban. You couldn't run a comic shop in a small town. There wasn't enough foot traffic to make it work. The dynamic changes enormously when the first Tim Burton Batman movie releases. That about doubles the size of the direct market in a year. That's crazy because by 1988, there were about 6,000 comic book shops in North America.
Nice, healthy.
Yeah, very healthy, very vibrant. I've had a question in my mind for a while now about ads in comics. We've asked we've asked it on this podcast. Why are there no ads in comics for like outside stuff? Marvel does a ton of ads for like their own books, but what about like other shit, right? So Jim Shooter, who was the editor in chief at Marvel from 1978 to 87, has an answer. I couldn't believe I read this, and I had to share it with you guys. This is a quote from him. He did a great look into his role in the direct market on his website. So he's got a lot of articles there you can read if you're interested. While I was editor in chief at Marvel, the ad salespeople, at President Jim Galton's behest, waged a campaign to upgrade the ads. National ads only was the mantra. They got rid of mail order ads like the ones for x ray specs and broken finger keychains. They made a concerted effort to go after movie ads, bicycles, sneakers, and other national products. We creative types did our part by building the total number of copies sold substantially. You know what? It was a catch 22. We were selling so many comics and therefore paying to print so many comics that if you factored out the cost of printing a page with an ad on it, it cost more money than we could get for the ad. I'm doing this from memory, but the following is a close, if not exact, estimate. I believe it cost in the low 20,000s to print an ad that ran in all 12 million plus Marvel comics in 1 month. But the most we could ever get for a page was $18,000. The reason we couldn't get higher rates were many. Advertisers realized that the comic book buyers tended to buy multiple titles. They didn't like our demographics and etc. Still, it was better to have 18 grand than not. We had to print 32 pages per issue anyway. Think about that. They they make less on an ad than they do for the cost of printing that ad in all of their comics in a given month.
That's wild. I just pulled an old, actually, an old Magneto,
Oh
old
wow.
book.
Giant
Uh,
Magneto.
got a nice little, what is this? Newton's Fruit Chewy
It's
Mix-Up.
Fig Newtons.
Fig Newtons. This costs more than it took the advertisers to collaborate, I guess. That's wild to think about because I remember, for those who don't know in the audience, I work in marketing, and at one point back in 2000, 2020, no, 20, like 18, 19, we used to have Marvel and DC reps to run these kinds of ads.
Yeah.
Um, but and I remember, yeah, it was page count. You'd have like 50K, 60K, a back cover like this. I don't even know, maybe 100K, because you would just distribute throughout.
I think that what Shooter is illuminating on the back half of that quote is why advertisers don't necessarily care to put ads in Marvel or DC or any comics for that matter. Because first of all, and this makes a ton of sense and is critical. If you go to your comic shop and you buy 5 Marvel comics, that means that you are very likely seeing the same ads 5 times. Which for them, for the advertiser, it's a little funky because you're paying an amount per potential views, but a lot of those views are coming from the same people. Like if you put on a television station, right, and you watch, let's say, the basketball game, your household, you are one person. That your television is one television. They say, "Oh yeah, the basketball game will be seen in 65 million homes," right? That's 65 million unique homes.
Yeah.
That's a big difference than me buying 5 different comics, which I ain't buying 5 comics. I'm buying more like 25 comics at the time.
Which only you are going to see, whereas a TV ad, 65 million homes, which on average, let's say maybe 4 people in a home.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay.
Exactly. There's just less bang for your buck, your ad dollar, so to
Yeah.
speak.
It's much
That
more about the repetition, like the exposure, that I think in that case like helps to drive the value. But at the time, you can't measure that. Print's so hard to measure.
and let's keep in mind newsstand is dying. So newsstand would be where you have all this foot traffic and diversity in terms of who is seeing your stuff. X-ray specs are not being purchased by 20-year-olds.
And you know what? They didn't even work.
No, no, don't tell the kids that.
But you know who buys X-ray specs? Marco.
Hey, Marco.
10, 11-year-olds who the direct market has literally never targeted.
Anytime I picture like who might be buying those mail-in things, I picture like any of the little rascals.
Sure.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Like there was another one here that I opened up. It was like glow in the dark posters. Yeah, like it feels like they fundamentally had the demographics wrong to some degree. And there wasn't a correction for that. Like the candy bars, whatever, fine. Someone might want a snack because maybe they're also selling something in the store. But yeah, like at the time, uh, how do you get a learning about your foot traffic at a comic shop if you're so removed from them?
This is a problem that I don't think the market has ever figured out how to solve. It's a double-edged sword. The direct market is a double-edged sword in almost every way possible. There are pros and cons to this. But I don't know if comics had a choice but to get in bed with comic book shops. I truly don't think they did. Because the alternative newsstand was done. Even if the television was never made, which was a massive factor in people stopping reading not just comics but all things. Um, Even if that never happened, newsstand was looking at comics and going, the margins are just too thin. I told you comics were 25 cents. How much money you think a newsstand vendor is making on a 25-cent comic? Maybe 5 cents. The fuck do they care about 5 cents?
A whole nickel.
Right. when a Time magazine at the same time was going for about 75 cents. Rather carry that or Playboy. That's what Jeanette Kahn used to argue about. Go ahead, Tyler.
No, I had a Playboy joke that I lost.
Ah.
Yeah, well, now I ruined it.
Marvel was adversarial towards newsstand. It wasn't just, hey, that's a part of our business model that's kind of going the way of the dodo. They wanted it done. I mentioned Carol Kalish earlier. She was a very, very smart, savvy woman who really loved comics, but she had a radical thought process when it comes to comic books. Um, she was there in the 80s, worked for Marvel. She was one of the few people who understood the direct market. She came up through New Media and Earjacks, which was a distributor, one of the distributors we talked about last week. Um, and she just got it. She just got it. She knew how to talk to retailers. She understood what it took on the ground floor to succeed at selling comics, and so Marvel brought her on board, and she was excellent at her job. Again, another unsung hero of comics. Here's a quote from Paul Levitz. She was a very ground level human being, and a very smart woman, but not pretentious. Um, I don't know why women are comics has a history of burying its women. But I read a lot of quotes that I just don't have time to share today from people who said that they're not sure that the direct market would have succeeded in the way that it did without Carol's genius, because she knew how to deal with retailers. And nobody else did. This is a point at which there is no direct market prior to 73. None of these old people knew how to do it, but she did. But her genius came with a little bit of a cost. Here is a quote from Jim Shooter. Kalish vehemently opposed a newsstand exclusive. She vehemently objected to any support of any kind for the newsstand. She claimed that the direct distributors and shop owners would see any such things as a betrayal, rise up in anger, and retaliate against Marvel. Why not just hand over the direct market to DC? What he's saying is something that we still see that mentality in comics today. We can't do this because they will hate us. The they in 1981 was newsstand. The they today is the direct market. Kalish did not want to in any way upset retailers by doing something directly for newsstand. Jim Shooter wanted to make a newsstand exclusive comic. Kalish said, no, no, hell no. The same way that the comic book industry didn't want to go to bed with digital for fear of alienating retailers. And we still see that. They don't want to lower prices for digital because of retailers. They don't want to go day and date with their digital services because of retailers.
From what I'm hearing here, the lesson to be learned is to break a few eggs. Like, take the risk, because the reward could be larger, and in the worst case, you're addressing two different audiences. Because even the newsstand person was a different person. Like, I think in Jim Shooter's thinking, uh, if you service an exclusive to the newsstand, fine, that doesn't exist in the retail, but what gets affected is the sale, not the relationship necessarily the with the retailer. You just have to deal with how much money am I losing because it's a diminishing market.
There's an aspect of that. But I do think it was a mistake to completely and utterly eschew the newsstand market. Um, it would have died regardless, but I don't think that Marvel had to kill it or not support it at all.
I mean, it sounds like they were kind of afraid of the retailers at that point. Like they were kind of controlling what they did, which sounds familiar. There's a reason why we don't have digital prices being cheaper than physical books now. Like that same relationship exists, for good or for worse.
I think Tyler was sleeping when I was saying that
Yeah,
earlier.
I was probably sneezing too. Yeah,
Go ahead, Marco.
Sorry, but looking at this in the rearview mirror, right? We can say that those things should have happened, or we can apply the same logic. Well, then, if that's the case, like the collapse of the industry didn't happen, right? There was a growth period, and sure, mistakes were made, and we'll get into that in a later portion of this. But the lesson there is we should be segmenting out the digital audience. We should be not focusing on, but creating a swim lane for that separate from the retailer space, because those are going to be two different people, two different environments, and two different mediums.
Yeah, why not both?
Because retailers apparently.
you want the soft shell and the hard shell.
But it's weird because you're right. They were afraid, and it's like, why? Why be so scared of these retailers who love comics, want to support it? Yeah, you're not getting this exclusive comic, but what is it to you? Newsstand is a dying industry. Nothing that newsstand could ever offer could combat what the comic book shop offers. Nothing.
And
Think
you
about it.
lean into that, like lean into that aspect, right? Lean into the community, right? Lean into the relationships you can build. Keep the digital piece as it is. It's a digital community. That's fine. Those things can exist. There's no need to force those two to come together.
What if
Yeah.
they can start doing like incentives for retailers? Maybe like specific covers that only retailers can get.
Oh, that's such a good idea.
Wouldn't be long before we saw that. Uh, Carol Kalish, unfortunately, never got to live out the fullness of her potential because she died suddenly in 1991, just as she was promoted to vice president for special projects at Marvel, and was working on how to continue to expand comics for Marvel. She passed um, after taking a fall while walking to the Marvel offices, getting off the train. She had a pulmonary embolism. She was 36 years old.
Wow.
Whoa.
Holy shit.
But dealing with comics fans will and distributors will do
Yeah,
to you.
fair. Yeah,
Those retailers, man.
She was
blaming them for
you
everything.
said she died while she was trying to expand the market, and I went, yeah.
Oh man. Not to make light of her death.
No, of course not.
I really I really wish that we had gotten to see what Carol would accomplish and what she would have thought of the 90s and how all of that went down.
Mm.
Um, because by all accounts, she was a very whip smart person. Um, Here's a quote from Chuck Rosansky on Kalish. I have an enormous respect for her legacy and for the great things that she did for the direct market. And I think that the direct market would have benefited enormously from her continuing to be around. I think that some of the faults that are in the system today might have been mitigated because she was incredibly smart. We lost Phil too, Phil Seuling, too young. He died. He died in '85. So we lost some juggernauts of the industry well before their time.
Yeah, some
Specifically of the
visionaries.
direct market,
Yeah.
or at least
Yo,
in that realm.
retailers got a hit out, bro.
I mean,
I take it back. Leave no day and date.
they're executing order 66 cents or something. Jeez.
So we talked about Batman 1989 and how big of a deal that movie was and how it doubled the amount of comic shops. Well, it didn't necessarily individually, but it was a part of what doubled it. Now, I've watched videos of like interviews with fans at release events for the movie and stuff, and the fervor around this movie is absolutely insane. Like, it's hard for me as someone who was born the year after the movie came out to really like wrap my head around how big of a movie it was. They were dressed up in fucking costumes and people were so excited and everything else. Comic shops had all kinds of Batman memorabilia, Batman Day, everything else. It was a big, big deal.
I wonder if some weird butterfly effect, since you were born a year after, the movie caused your birth.
Wow, my birth is something we absolutely should not get into today.
Okay, that's a different deep dive.
Hmm.
But my birthday does happen to be 616, Marvel numbers. So there you go.
Oh, true, true, true.
You would think that the direct market doubling in size would be a great thing. In 1993, there were 10,000 comic book shops in the US, and newsstand was only 10% of the market.
You said this is
So,
93?
yeah,
Okay.
I was born.
there you go. We got a little Marco into the world as the direct market was about to collapse. Yay.
Ah, I signaled the doom.
The Antichrist.
The anti-comics.
Um, there was a big, big, big problem though. A big problem that nobody seemed to care about. Um, all those comic shops that opened up are not being run by businessmen or women. They're being run by fans. And not all of them are even being run by fans. What happened when Batman came out, and also what's happening adjacent to this is the collectibles market is exploding, right? You've got trading cards that are massively popular, like sports cards. Um, you've got toys. The toy market is becoming a thing. Just all these collectibles are popping up and becoming a big deal. And comics were on the radar of collectible vendors and speculators, people who would buy things with the idea that they would be more valuable later. And so a lot of those people were finding their way into comic shops. Distributors, for their part, were extremely happy with all these new accounts, all these new stores to service. But who are these people they're servicing? The distributors were aware that they were distributing to people who had no idea how comics worked. They're ordering way too many copies of comics, thinking that they're going to be able to sell all this through, and if they can't, make a ton of money in a year or two when the comic is older, and thus will, of course, be so valuable.
Yep.
We all know that that didn't happen.
I still have
And
a
it still doesn't.
Yeah, I still have a polybag copy of Death of Superman.
Yep. Many inexperienced fans became comic shop owners, drawn in by the allure of money in the 90s. They would go on to mismanage their shops, over ordering books that would go on to pile up in bargain bins. Distributors knew these shops were over ordering and being mismanaged, but they said nothing because they were making money off of incompetence. At first, well, I should also say, what's happening alongside this is the war for distribution. Capital City Comics and Diamond are on top of the world at this time. And they are kind of buying up the rest of the market. Um, because a lot of distributors are jumping out and they're selling themselves off to Diamond, to Capital City, and so it's kind of like a buyout war. And This, what I'm about to say, is a quote from Chuck. At first, this decline in the overall number of distributors seemed to have very little impact, as the larger distributors continued to operate many of the regional warehouses that they absorbed from their defunct brethren. Eventually, however, the battle for market share between the largest distributors, Diamond and Capital City, became so heated that they began opening up as a quote bona fide account in good standing anyone who could clear a $300 monthly check. The
I
buy-in
could do
from
that.
Marvel, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. The buy-in from Marvel a decade ago in 1979, 80 was 3,000. Now it's 300.
And that I assume leads to all those owed bills down the line, right? Or does that just mean that anyone could just get distribution?
Yeah,
That means
And
anybody.
then
anybody can
now
get it.
everyone now there's comics everywhere. Now there's
Right,
comics at
right.
your local bodega at this point.
I could just pay that.
Yeah,
It's
I
fine.
could I
I'll
could
get the
start a little
discount.
shop. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
I'm gonna be bouncing out, everybody. I need to take the pup to a vet. Um, I will continue in chat where I can. Cheers, guys.
Take care, dude. Good luck to the dog.
Hell of a euphemism. Hey, fellas, I gotta take a pup to a vet.
He's gonna drop the kids off at the pool too, I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
um, I'm going to continue with the quote that I was in from Chuck. This was a catastrophically bad decision, as it led to approximately another 4,000 retailers jumping into the comic business between 1988 and 1993. A great number of those would-be comics retailers were so ill-prepared and undercapitalized as to be laughable. The joke was on the established comics retailing community, however, as many of these new retailers had no greater marketing plan than to cannibalize the business of an existing comic shop. While this increase in the number of retailers did temporarily expand the overall size of the comics business, it also grossly overinflated the comics market. Many of these poor newbie retailers had no idea how to order comics, nor did they understand that you needed to sell at least 80% of what you purchased from your distributor each month. As a result, they grossly overordered new comics and gradually tied up more and more of their working capital in unsold new comics that they then stored in their back rooms. Initially, this was great for both the publishers and the surviving large distributors, as new comic sales went up and up and up. Inevitably, however, all overinflated markets crash. In my mind, the end of our world began with the remarkably ill conceived Death of Superman marketing fiasco in late 1992.
Everyone had that comic.
Yeah,
Even
they sure did.
even my dad's collection, because I'm born at this point. Right before I was born. You said December '92. Is that when it started?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was already born at that point. Yeah. My dad still had that comic. My dad stopped buying comics before I was born. Like my dad had comics when he was a kid. So I have like comics from like the '80s, and then it jumps all the way to Death of Superman in his collection. So like even he was picking it up, and he wasn't even buying comics at the point. So everyone had one.
I want to stick a little bit on what Chuck is saying before we talk. We're going to talk about Death of Superman. There's no way to tell this story without it. Whenever people talk about the direct market and the problems and how bad the 90s were, no one talks about this. I have been reading comics for over 20 years now. I've never heard about this prior to me doing research for this deep dive. I've never heard about how the market overinflated itself, not just because they were printing too many comics or bad comics or whatever you want to say, but that there were too many comic shops that were just being run badly.
It's one of those things that like it's so deep in the paint and you don't like as a fan, if you admit something like that, you'll be it's like you'll be placing blame on the people that are victims of the thing, right? If you look at a comic shop owner and say, well, there were too many comic shops and that's a massive issue, they'll say, oh, so you just want us all to close?
Maybe not all of you closed, but some of you shouldn't have opened.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what Chuck is illuminating is that, there are comic shops opening so close in proximity to each other that the new shop is eating the sales of the old one. Oh, this one's more convenient. Let me hit this new shop that just opened up. And so now you're not going to your old LCS, but the new LCS ain't going to live. It's not going to survive. But now the old one can't either.
Yeah.
It's like
And the
what a, I
margins are still. Sorry, Tyler. Go
was
ahead.
gonna say, it's like when a coffee shop opens up in front of another coffee shop. Just
Right.
ruins it for everyone, really.
But so many people drink coffee that sometimes that's
true.
okay.
It's less niche. Yeah.
Within me right now, I can think of like 4 places where I could get. I don't drink coffee, but where a person could get coffee, and that's okay because probably everybody in my neighborhood is drinking the thing, but not
Listen,
everybody needs comics.
I will go to all of those places. Yeah, absolutely.
There you go. Maybe in the same day.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a house of cards. It's a house of comics, which is what I very desperately wanted to name this deep dive. But it's a house of comics. It's being built on nothing but the comics themselves, which are not worth anything. Everybody thinks that they're worth something. They're not worth much. These retailers, these distributors are operating on thin margins. These are stores that are being held up by comics that at this point maybe only cost a little more than $1. There are no stores that exist other than comic shops at this time, to my awareness, where the primary thing you sell costs about $1. That's insane. That is insane to me. But again, everybody's making money hand over fist. And then the death of Superman comes. So creatively, this event came about because the sales of Superman books were down. There was a Lois and Clark TV show that everybody's seen, the Dean Cain, Terry Hatcher television show, which I liked. I thought it was all right.
Yeah.
Good.
Dean Cain. He's totally normal now, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Regular
Well, listen,
guy.
and Terry Hatcher can get it.
Oh my God.
Too early for that, Cale.
That-
Come on.
I was desperate for that housewife.
That's good, Sean. I like that one.
Thank you. The television show was gonna marry Lois and Clark, but they weren't married yet in the comics. They were gonna do that. The plan creatively was to marry Lois and Clark, and that's what the comics were sort of building to, I guess. But because the TV show was gonna do it, and Warner Brothers wanted synchronicity, they wanted the comics to wait for the TV show. So that means that the entire Superman line of books had to figure out something else to do with their time in the interim. Also, there was a belief among the creators that Superman just wasn't as valued in the same way as he had been prior to Crisis on Infinite Earths, which at this point happened almost a decade ago. He wasn't the flagship character as he had been. So they wanted to do something to change that. Mike Carlin, who was the editor of the Superman line at the time, said, quote, "The world was taking Superman for granted. So we literally said, let's show what the world would be like without Superman." Louise Simonson, who is another one of the women who helped comics survive and thrive, she worked in the X office. And she knew that one of the ways that you could pop a rating, so to speak, increase sales for a comic, was to kill somebody. That was a lesson that she had learned in the X office. Big shock. And so it was her initial pitch to kind of say, hey, That could work. Thus, the death of Superman was born. Now,
Seems right.
look, it worked. It did work.
Did they have plans like, all right, so Superman's not selling that well, right? All right, let's pop a number, let's kill him. Well, then let's spin it off into 4 different Superman characters. And then we can get more money from each of those 4 times at this point? Was there a plan there to use that as a launching point?
Well, at this time, there were 3 different Superman books. Hound, if you're here, or anyone else, please correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't want to get this wrong. But I believe this is the Triangle era. And there were already 3 Superman books on the market. So adding one isn't a stretch. But certainly they wanted to keep multiple Superman books on stands. It's just that the 3 that they had weren't even selling as well as Spider-Man. Like 3 books combined were not
Combined,
selling
okay.
as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was brutal. Here's a fun fact though that I never knew. Maybe you knew. I didn't know. There was a Neil Gaiman, Matt Wagner 4-issue miniseries that was canceled because it also featured the death of Superman.
Foreshadowing for Neil Gaiman's career.
But it's crazy. The death of Superman killed comics, so to speak. But it was going to happen either way. There was going to be a death of Superman either way.
It was a creative. It was in the air at that
Yep.
point. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. And so the death of Superman happens. Superman number 75. Go ahead.
I was gonna say it is kind of funny how the death being like a Louis Simonson idea coming from the X Office, probably the death of the Phoenix probably helps influence this.
Yeah, that very well could be the case
Man,
because
so you could say Jean Grey almost killed comics.
yeah, well, don't do that to me.
She's catches strays. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's very possible. So Superman 75 comes out, and what happens is very interesting. The world opens up to comics again. In the sense that the comic book industry kind of insulated itself from the world through the direct market. Used to see comics all over the place on newsstands where everyday people were walking by. And so comics were a part of the purview of your world, even if they weren't a part of your world necessarily. But then they retreated. There were so many people who probably read comics at some point in their life who never stepped foot in a comic book shop. That changed in 93, 94 with Superman 75, where now it's national news. They're killing Superman. An American icon is dying. The world wanted to see that. So they went to shops and bought it. But it wasn't just people who were curious that bought it. It was retailers and speculators who overordered, who bought a tremendous amount of copies, thinking this was going to be the most valuable thing ever printed on paper. These people were dumb. They were dumb for multiple reasons. One, because Superman had already died before in comics. It wasn't a thing that had never happened. They were just hyping it. It was a different time frame. They were making a big deal out of it. And so people got excited.
They actually did marketing around it to sell it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is a good and bad thing. Because the marketing made it so that the comics sold tremendously, but it also created a false sense that this would have value attached to it. And the publishers deserve blame for this. Because by this point, marketing teams are already as much a part of what gets published as the creators. So they knew what they were doing. They also knew before 75 was even published that Superman would be resurrected in issue 500 of Adventures of Superman. So there was never any intention of actually killing the character. But they promised. Never bought a comic before. That pissed off a lot of people. It pissed off a lot of people that they felt lied to by DC, that Superman was never really dead. But also, people felt lied to because they thought this was going to have value and it didn't. Tyler just talked about how his dad has copies or a copy of Death of
One
Superman.
copy. He wasn't crazy.
One copy.
Yeah.
Lots of people at that time probably had 20, 30 copies. They bought the poly bag, they bought the variant cover, the foil cover, everything else. You're muted.
Probably the armband.
The armband.
Is the polybag one? Is there a chance for something else in there? Is there a reason it's polybag? Or just like, oh, the death is in there, so you can't look at it unless you buy it.
To my knowledge, that was just like a
Gimmick.
a way to keep it pristine. Because again, Marvel and DC are guilty. They're leaning into the collectability of comics.
Should I rip it open right now?
Do you have it right now?
I have it somewhere. I'd have to look for it. It's somewhere.
That would have been sick. But yeah, that all the schemes and ploys that we deride today were times 1,000 at this point. And the Superman 75 and all of that stuff had a very detrimental effect on comics. Extremely detrimental. Go to almost any comic shop that has a back issue bin situation, you could probably find copies of it there.
You ever go to like a not on an estate sale, but like sometimes they have like storage locker sales for comics, where like a storage locker is open and then you can just go in and pick some stuff out of it. You're gonna find those foil covers immediately. I got lucky enough to find the first appearance of Emma Frost in one of them, except the person who had bought it drew garters on every woman's legs. But I think that's Sean. Was that your issue? Did I find your issue? You want it back?
No, not
Okay.
me. I wasn't alive yet. Maybe.
Well, I mean,
I don't know.
I don't know how recent those sketches are, but yeah, like they're all over the place. And then even like I always think of like the 2099 did like a whole bunch of foil variants at the time
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
Everything was doing. It was all about. At this point, I'm so glad you said that because it sparked a thought in me that has to be stated. Losing Newsstand was critical because you lost the casual reader and the capacity for someone to see a comic, buy it, and become a fan. You don't have to cross any threshold to see a comic in 1971. Now you do. And that left a lot of people out.
Those are the potential readers that the companies always talk about.
Right.
And comics pulling out of it helped kill that whole section, that whole opportunity. Like there's no bringing it back. You can't Superman this death, unfortunately.
So because of that, right? Because of the loss of potential, the price of comics continued to rise. The direct market meant that for Marvel and DC, they couldn't bank on the casual purchase. They had to rely on us, the hardcore reader. And the only thing they could do was increase prices to make more money. Because you can never assume that there's just going to be this new wave of readership. You're not getting any more children. So they figure, okay, we can't keep raising prices beyond, whatever it is now, $1.50, right? Let's do a poly bag. Let's charge 50 cents more and put it in a bag. Okay, whatever. Let's create a variant. Let's create a foil cover. All these things that they would do to be able to artificially increase the price of the comic. They know we'll buy it because we're fucking fiends, and they're making an extra 50 cents for nothing. What is Red Band?
What I was going to say. Yeah.
Red Band's even worse, honestly. fine idea in its inception, but continuing it makes no sense.
At least they're putting at least there's something materially different about the interiors on some of the pages.
Yeah, I was gonna say at least the original Blunt Hunt stuff, yeah, but Blade,
Well,
there's
and
no other option.
with the poly bags, you're at least getting a bag, right? Like,
It's the garbage bag's already built in.
there you go.
Oh my god, that's fucking crazy, man. So that's why Marvel and DC embraced all of this bullshit because they can't rely on casual readers anymore. If there was still a newsstand market that's doing better than 10% of their business, maybe they don't fall as in love with all these schemes. Well, Marvel would have anyway, because at this point, Marvel is run by a douchebag. Marvel is run by several douchebags who only care about making money. That's the only thing they cared about.
What time is this? Is this
We're still in 93, 90, the early 90s. The collapse of the industry is literally the next year.
sure.
It's already in progress. Marvel is run by people who only care about maximizing profits and nothing else. And if you look at
Well,
Marvel's publishing line at the time, people hate when I say this. It is what it is. There is a reason why people talk about the 90s as being a creative low point for Marvel Comics
you don't want to have you don't
because
want
it
to
is.
read Punisher as an angel.
No,
You don't want your Night Thrasher comics. I do.
no.
I do. So I think somebody mentioned. I think Common Sense mentioned slapstick comics. I'm a slapstick fan.
No, I don't want any of it. And the market didn't either.
Damn.
The market did not want it either. Um, there is a thing we need to talk about that happens in this same time frame that had much better long-term effects on the industry than it did short-term effects. And that is Image Comics. We're going to get to that in just a moment. Right now, I want to take a quick pause to thank you guys for being here, to say we appreciate you for being here, and to give a special shout out to our patrons who make all of this possible. We are a podcast that is supported exclusively by our listeners. And so we take time out every single episode to let them know that we appreciate them. So special shout out to our Pals vs. Legends, Thunderstruck Rebecca Alejandro, the Hound of Justice, Atomic Hound, Starcross Catherine Stars, the Red Spiral Spiral Storm, Adam and Bernie the Best Boy, the Spear of Judgment Jay's Jumble, Matthew Malice Price, Jalen the Sanguine Sorcerer. And a thank you to our Pals vs. members, the Night Stalker Harris Ajinski, Brian Demolished Del Pozo, Kefis the Incorruptible, Momentum Mike Elliott, Dan the True Trudeau, Marley Manastorm, Slow Flow Dameron, Christian Uncaged, Always Laughing, The Spirit of Justice, Izzy's Issues, The Great Destroyer Hyper Viper 89, Robert Runback Cashaback, Pete the Dreamweaver Collins, James Just Jamming Jones, Paul Powerhouse Smith, Andrew the Galaxian Smith, Eon Knight the Cosmic Avenger, Matthew the Shade Cosmo, BJ Kicks, the Living Blade Boss Deer, the Grand Alchemist Chop Harder Alchemist, John Barrier B, and Doomsday David Melendez Doria. If you did not hear your name, don't worry, we will get to you a little bit later on. I also want to take this opportunity to remind you guys, or let you know for the first time, that this Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern, we have the pleasure of interviewing Mark Waid.
Y'all getting nervous yet?
No.
No, I think after Jeff Johns, I'm good. I didn't think that was real, and I got over it. So and then we got
I'm actually excited.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's gonna be fun. You guys listening right now, you determine how big of a deal this really is. Because lots of people get to interview Mark Waid. He's kind of, he makes himself available.
He likes to talk. Yeah.
And there are a lot of channels that have a Mark Waid interview. We want to be one of the channels that has a Mark Waid interview that does numbers and that gets him to come back. And you guys will be the strength of that, of what allows that to be possible. So hopefully you'll show up on the day, Tuesday, 6 p.m. Very short window, 30 minutes. Make sure you're there. It's going to be fun. Let's hit a couple comments. If you guys want to grab some comments while I drink some water, maybe there's some
It
good.
it is kind of not a specific comment, but it is kind of crazy how many people like that. I mean, it makes sense in terms of age ranges, but like '90s was their time.
Yeah.
You know, Chad Cowder here mentioning '90s is my era. I didn't have a comic shop local. I would mail order comics. James, mid '80s to mid '90s were the best time in comics for me. I assume you were probably reading DC at that point. Hayden Sideout says, I've got a Night Thrasher #1. Hell yeah, brother.
Hayden's young.
Oh, yeah, he knows
How you
game.
got that?
He knows ball.
Could be. Eastern time zone. Damn you all. Sorry, Eastern.
Oh, don't be so rude to her. Tell him, damn you all to all of her. Jeez.
Common sense with an interesting question. Mark Miller tried to make his comics prices cheap in his nightclub series. How much did he sell? Well, we don't have the sales of comics available to us anymore the way that we did prior to the pandemic. So we don't know how many issues Night Thrasher was selling. But it's not a Marvel or DC book. And there's not enough of a price slashing you could do to make a non DC, non IP book by a creator who's not necessarily hot right now compete with what is doing numbers in the market. So yeah. All right. Let's talk about the image revolution. So the image founders were almost all creators who made most of their bones at Marvel in the late 80s, early 90s. You're talking Jim Lee, you're talking Rob Liefeld, you're talking Jim Valentino, you're talking about uh, Mark Silvestri,
Yep.
talking about Eric Larson. Um, Lots of heavy hitters. Some of those names still ring out today. The majority of those names I just said, you probably
Yeah.
are seeing something they're doing right now. They were tired of not making the kind of money they thought they were owed and what they felt they were deserved. I mean, Jim Lee and Claremont's X-Men #1 sold. It's one of the highest selling comics in the history of comics, of the direct market. He wasn't being paid. He was being paid a fraction of what that comic would have made for Marvel at that time. Jim Lee's art style was what was associated with X-Men at that time. He wasn't being paid enough to justify that. So they left. They said, we'll do our own thing. Fuck it.
At its inception, it was a workers' rights thing. It was, hey, why do you get to keep all that money? We created it.
Yeah. It was revolutionary. It was exciting. It was disastrous. The disaster level isn't talked about enough. We only talk about Image in glowing terms today, but when Image was first created, it's hard to see it as much more than a money grab, quite frankly, because the creators that joined forces, Tyler's right. It was about money. It was a workers' rights issue, but they weren't doing anything for creators that weren't themselves. They weren't trying to necessarily help foster an environment that other creators can come in and make money. And they certainly weren't trying to help the direct market or the market of comics. They were trying to get their just due. They also weren't writers by and large. So, and they certainly weren't writers first. So their comics weren't well written. They look great if your sensibility was those artists, but if it wasn't, there wasn't anything there for you. Coupled with the fact that they had no business acumen whatsoever. They didn't know how to run a company. They didn't know how to get comics into shops on time. They didn't know anything about any of that. So, in April of 1993, less than 20% of Image's releases shipped on time.
I mean, they're doing a little better now.
Say that one more time.
In 1993, less than 20% of Image's comics shipped on time.
Wow. Wow.
Compared to Valiant, who shipped 100% of their comics on time. DC, who was publishing quite a bit more comics than Image, shipped 91% of their comics on time. And Marvel, who doesn't give a shit about anybody, shipped 79% of their comics on time. Image had no business being in business without knowing how to do business.
Got to sell product, but you're not going to get it in front of your customers.
Right. Exactly. And again, in the newsstand business, this never would have been possible.
Yeah.
You couldn't have run a business doing that. Because by the time newsstand gets the books, it'd be late, right? And the market may have moved on, so they're just going to send all that shit back.
Yep.
And Image dies immediately because of a lack of sell-through. The only reason they could do this is because when retailers bought the books, they bought the books. So it's their problem what happens after that. And that's bad for the retailers.
But you also have to think there's probably some thought that even these delayed books are probably like, oh, they'll sell for buckets of money, later on once a little time goes by. So just hang on a little longer.
Hang tight. Exactly.
An Image at the time too. Every one of the creators kind of was just doing their own thing at the publisher, right? Like their own books. Some would be out on time, some wouldn't. Todd McFarlane probably had a little more business sense than someone like Rob Liefeld at the time. But it was almost like segmented in a way.
I would say it absolutely was segmented.
Yeah.
Like some of the problem was, the business elements that they didn't understand, like printing and ship, and everything like that, relationships. But some of the problem was also just their ability to get their work done. Without an editor harping on you to ship books, these creators are taking their time.
There's a reason why Youngblood just came out with a remake of the first issue rather than a continuing series, whereas Savage Dragon has not stopped.
It's true. Yeah. The apex of this disaster, and when I tell you that this had a significant amount to do with the collapse of the direct market, I am not kidding. Any comics historian will highlight this event. Deathmate. I wanted to do a deep dive on Deathmate badly, but I wasn't sure that there would be support for it. I'm getting it in here, but I'm not going to do everything. We'll see how it goes down the road. But Deathmate was a crossover between Valiant and Image Comics that came out between 93 and 94. So the publisher that ships 100% of their books on time teamed up with the publisher that ships 20% of their books on time. This was a fucking mess. A mess that the comics industry wasn't prepared for. Because the hype around Image was extremely high. These are the superstars of comics. There's really nobody bigger than Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld in particular at this point. This is when the industry is artist driven. These are the artists. So they team up with Valiant to do this team up book, and everybody's like, "Oh my god, this is it. We're gonna get rich. Think about how much money we're gonna make off variants and polybags and everything else. This is crazy." Deathmate shipped so off course, so poorly, that there were issues of this thing that were months and months and months delayed. So by the time retailers got it, no one cared because you got issue 2, you got issue 3, then issue 4 doesn't come out the time between releases was ridiculous.
Did it make a Doomsday Clock look on time?
Please, Doomsday Clock. You forget Doomsday Clock. How about Astonishing X-Men?
Oh, geez, yeah. And this was I did a quick look at it because I had tangential knowledge about this, but like this was marketed as like the biggest comics crossover event. I mean, Wikipedia says since Uncanny X-Men and New Teen Titans in '82, so about a
There, there,
decade over.
there hadn't been one. There
Yeah,
hadn't been one since then.
cross universe crossover.
Yeah, yeah. A crossover between publishers hadn't happened in a decade. This was a massive, massive deal. Image is the new kid on the block. Even Valiant was like, they had something going on. It's not the Valiant of today. Um, Image is responsible for this going so badly. They couldn't even get their own house in order. They thought it was a bright idea to do a team up comic. It was a disaster.
Fascinating.
I've never read it, but I've heard it's dreck. I heard it's really bad.
Hey, if we ever do that book club, that's like a controversial comics. This could make. I don't know how you'd read it, but six issues.
Borrow Hound's copy.
Oh, sure. It's the community copy. Yeah.
Uh yeah, this is one of the worst things that could have happened to the comics industry at the time. Had Image had some sense about them, they would have been a boon to the comics industry. I think that if Image had the forward thought to be what it would become, which was a house for independent creators to do something different, it could have been a powerhouse because there was no avenue for that yet.
And
It
that was
hadn't been created.
a Valentino thing down the line, right?
Valentino had a big part to play in
Yeah.
that. There are a few other people, but yeah. Think about like Bone, which I don't know much about, but Bone was a big deal. What if Bone was published through Image
Or ElfQuest at the time.
or ElfQuest?
Yeah.
What if Image had made itself that home? It didn't do that. Instead, we got Extreme Comics and everything else. And I'm not saying those are bad ideas or whatever. Like that's all fine, and there's a place for that. They didn't do anything to help any other creators.
At the time, Dark Horse was that place.
More, yeah, certainly more so.
That's where like Concrete was coming up at the time. Yeah, for sure. It almost seems like they didn't become that until they had to, because they couldn't bank on the creators anymore. Because some of them even went right back to Marvel, right back to
They couldn't bank. Yeah, they couldn't bank on those creators
exactly.
anymore.
Yeah, the founders.
Steve Matthews, believe it or not, dude, this is so weird. I was just thinking about you the other day. I was like, wow, we haven't seen Steve in a while. Hope he's okay. Good to see you. He says, I would love to know what industry veteran Barry Windsor Smith thought of contributing to Deathmate and how it eventually turned out. Get those quotes for a deep dive.
I hope those quotes exist because we ain't getting them.
Yeah, like I said, I didn't want to go too deep into the Deathmate thing today, but everybody involved has regrets. I did a personal deep dive like a year ago into Deathmate, and everybody has regrets. No one is happy.
Even Hound might have regrets buying it. He says, "I'm not even sure I saved my copies of Deathmate." Wild.
Wow.
It's
How-
funny when you hear like moments of like lucidity from Hound, where he's like, "Look, this was so bad it almost dropped me out of comics. This book was so bad I threw it away, not my mom."
The veil was lifted from him.
That's right.
Um. So to take things back to um the collapse of the direct market, which again, Image directly had a hand in. Um, Marvel's in deep shit at this point in time. Marvel is in deep shit. Ron Perlman, not to be confused with Ron Perlman, was the head honcho at Marvel at this time, and he's a business guy. First and foremost, he knows nothing about comics. Comics is not his bag. He's a business guy. He saw a lot of opportunity to make money through comics, and he pushed hard for all the kinds of schemes that we already discussed. Here's a quote from Ron about what happened in the 90s. We couldn't get a handle on how much the market was driven by speculators. Between the people buying 20 copies and reading one and keeping 19 for their nest egg. That's a very lucid comment from Ron. And I appreciate him saying it. The problem I have with it is that he fucking caused it.
Yeah. We couldn't get a handle on it. We lost control.
What kind of shit to say is that?
Yeah.
So think about this, Cale. The direct market is struggling to get people to buy ads.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why is because you buy multiple copies of a comic and they don't know how many actual people are reading the books. That's a problem that would exist in the comics industry no matter what, because people will buy multiple books. That's a good thing. But here's Ron saying, hey, people were buying 20 copies to keep one for themselves and sell the rest. That's an artificial inflation of the amount of copies of comics that are being sold. So when you pull the speculators outside of the market, how many actual people are buying books? Well, go ahead, Gil.
Well, I was just gonna say it hmm. Ah, man, adds the numbers of all this mess. It messes with me. It deflates the obviously it deflates the initial number, right? But then like the ones that never get sold, so say I buy 20 copies of Death of Superman or whatever, and the ads that are in Death of Superman are only ever seen by one person because those 20 copies uh don't ever get seen. So it's not even easy money for the ad companies either.
Exactly. It's not easy money. Um, the people most likely to buy something based on an advertisement in those comics are kids. Um, and comics were not targeting kids. On top of the fact that you couldn't account for how many people were actually seeing your ad to begin with. So it wasn't worth it to do. And Marvel, Ron Perlman made this problem worse. When speculators realized how little money there actually was in comics for them, they pulled out. And that led to a disastrous situation for the industry. If you guys could rap for a second, I want to unplug my mic.
Yeah, we got a couple of comments here. Roboters 100, and this is what I mentioned. Meanwhile, Jim Lee was literally plotting his way into DC. Yeah, like it was, like even like Jim Lee specifically, because like he hasn't really gone back to Image really. Like even his creator owned stuff like Wildcats, where'd that go? That property went to DC.
Yeah, there's one guy around from Wildcats, and he is barely around.
Yeah, so like it was so in its inception, for some of the founders, was a short-sighted gain. You might be muted too, Sean. Yeah. Would be helpful if Marco, helpful if marketing Marco was here. How have none of us ever said marketing Marco before?
Well, he had to take a dog to a vet, so
I'm glad he's gonna finally get that rash checked out though.
huh. Hurt. Kurt Wildshit says it's funny actually. If you know anyone who's into retro gaming, this exact scourge of resellers and speculators is running rampant there right now. Same in anime toys and figurines. We have a guy. I work at a toy store. There's a guy that comes in. He's got a website where he just picks up just the random bullshit that nobody wants, and he'll type in like the barcode or whatever on the back, and he'll look up the item, and if it's even slightly above like what he's paying for it, he'll resell it. And it's just it's easily the type of stuff that uh is keeping stuff afloat right now. It's ridiculous.
It's so frustrating. And I have always hated speculators in the comic space. Before I knew any of this type of stuff, I hated it because I think it dilutes the fandom aspect in a way where,
Yep.
like I buy comics to read them. And I think that's their value.
But if people are, if the only numbers we have are based on speculators, how are we going to get the best writing on it?
Yeah. You can't. Can't. By 1996, there were only 4,000 comic shops left in the nation.
Can you give us the number you had at the beginning of today's episode?
It was in 1993 or 1991, it was 10,000.
And then we're at 4,000?
Yep.
In 2 years? 3 years?
96, so 3 years.
Sheesh. Over half of them decimated. Thanos did less damage.
Yep.
Nuts.
It's sad. It really is. It really is. And that happened for so many reasons. I mean, we talk about who's to blame. And next week when we finish this up, that'll be a big part of it. Everybody's to blame. If you've been following the story so far, every single arm of comics is responsible for this. The publishers are responsible because they saw money and went blind. The distributors are responsible because they allowed comic shops to open accounts and do business that had no business doing business. Retailers are responsible because the retailers that opened up shop just to make money and didn't know anything and weren't necessarily comic book fans, and were opening at a time when the market was extremely competitive. Yeah, a lot of the people who opened comic shops in the 70s and 80s were not businessmen. But at the time, passion was what drove the industry. And so you might not have known the most about business, but you knew enough about comics to sell them to people who wanted them, almost like a friend. Like if Cale asks me, what do you think about such and such comic? I can tell him and he'll buy it or he won't. That's the strength of a comic book shop owner. Being a fan.
Yep.
And they had time to figure out the rest. But when the market was hyper competitive in the 90s, and you might find 3 shops in a given area, you didn't have time to learn on the fly. And so what did they lean into? Gimmicks and tricks that didn't work. Creators are to blame. The Image founders, I'm not blaming them for leaving Marvel. That's cool, dude. Viva la Revolution.
Yeah, that's what they were thinking about.
Well, that's the problem. That's exactly what he's saying.
Yeah. They didn't do anything revolutionary once they got there.
They left the superhero market to go make more superheroes.
Right. What is Spawn?
Peak.
I agree with you. But also, that's superhero comics. And again, I fucking love superhero comics. They're great.
Yep.
But what did you contribute other than what was already there?
Yep.
Even on the
Passwords,
back end.
pouches.
Yeah.
It almost feels like the 90s and Image's inception feels like what Distillery is to 2010 Image comics. It's a short-term gain based on that are creator driven with gimmicks that is not really changing the industry.
I'm gonna take that one step further and a little bit closer to home. That is might be a little bit contentious. Ghost Machine is that.
I push back a bit because at least Ghost Machine has the inception of this being continued on by creators other than themselves, allegedly, according to them. Which maybe is a direct response to the inception of Image and tweaking it.
I think you can make that argument from the standpoint of whether or not Distillery and Image or Ghost Machine are bringing on new creators or creating a space for new creators. But the biggest difference between those two initiatives and the inception of Image is that they have business strategy.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And Ghost Machine has the backing and shelter of Image as well.
And also people on it that aren't just creatives.
Yes.
Yeah, we've met quite a few of them, and they're smart people, and they know what they're doing, and it allows the creators to just create, which is what creators should want to do. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think Rob Liefeld got in the business of comics to fucking figure out when they ship. I think he got into it to draw cool ass shit. That's what he should have stuck to.
And wear the shit out of some jeans.
Yeah. Absolutely. Point of reference, Spawn sold 1.7 million copies with issue 1 in 1991.
Do you guys have any of those?
No.
Okay.
Hell no.
I have one. I don't know why I have one, but I have one.
Spawn number 83, 7 years later, 98,000 copies.
That's quite a drop. That's still not that bad, especially in today's market.
See, that's the thing.
Yep.
Today's market, 98K is pretty darn good. And even at that time in 97, 98, Spawn 83 is the 6th best selling comic. If you take that back 5 years, 3 years, 10, 20 years, Spawn would have been any comic being published that did those numbers would have been canceled. That is not successful.
Yep.
It's rough. There's one last element of this that I want to get into today because I wanted to make sure we presented the boom and the highs of the 80s, but also the lows of the 90s, and kind of close that loop. And so there's one last element that we have to talk about, which is the distribution war of the 90s. This is the final nail in the coffin of comics for the 90s. So Diamond and Capital City Comics were at war for hearts and minds of distributors all over the place to see who was going to basically be underneath them. And distribution was getting smaller and smaller, less and less distributors. Marvel made a decision that was disastrous. Because in 1994, Marvel purchased Heroes World, which was a distributor. They were the 3rd largest distributor, but that doesn't mean a lot in this context because Diamond and Capital City made up about 85% of the distribution market at this exact same time. And Heroes World was in 3rd, but 3rd meant like, some small percentage. 15% was the rest of the distribution channel. So very small amount. And Marvel decided to buy Heroes World in order to distribute their own comics. Knowing nothing about comics distribution, knowing nothing about any of that, they decided to jump into that lane. And it was really fucked. Not just for Marvel themselves, who now all of a sudden have to do all this busy work that they were never involved in before, but for retailers as well. Because now you're losing X amount of your orders. You can no longer buy Marvel Comics as a distributor. You can no longer buy Marvel Comics through Marvel. You have to buy them through Heroes World. And as a retailer, you have to buy them through Heroes World. If you're a distributor and you want to distribute Marvel Comics as a sub distribution, you have to do it through Heroes World, if you can at all. If you can't, now you have to figure out how you're going to raise the amount of books that you are distributing to accommodate the lack of Marvel. Retailers have to figure it out too. It created a disastrous situation. It lasted 2 years. Heroes World closed in 95. They fucked up.
Was it just because it complicated everything? Was it make losing Marvel money at that point, having to put money into distribution as well?
Not only was it losing Marvel money on that front, and again, they didn't know what the fuck they were doing. Heroes World did not have the capacity to handle Marvel's comics on their own. They were the third largest distributor, which doesn't mean a lot. And they just didn't have the infrastructure to serve the nation.
So currently, we're talking about the Diamond issue, and some of that involves the warehouse space. That was an Alliance was really interested in Diamond specifically for the warehouse space and the warehouse reach.
Yep.
Heroes World would maybe have 1-2 warehouses compared to Diamond and Capital Cities, Capital Comics, whatever it was, 40 each across the country.
And how do you distribute across the U.S. when you only have that little of a footprint?
Exactly. Yeah.
It was an absolute disaster.
And this is coming from a time where Marvel still wasn't at 100% on time with their comics. It's in the 70s, right? Percentages on like how they shipped on time. I can imagine having to ship with that little of a footprint makes it even worse.
Yeah, in no way was this positive. It wasn't positive for anybody involved in the business of comics, not even Marvel.
Who called that? Was it one of the executives, like a
They
Perlman?
thought that bringing distribution under their control was going to lead to them being able to have more of a piece of the pie. They didn't want to share money with distributors. It's all greed.
They wanted that full vertical of everything. Yeah,
And that just doesn't work in comics. It just doesn't.
All
And
the
it
way down.
never has. Yeah.
All the way down. Creators, distributors, retailers, just doesn't work.
Yeah. So that is really it. That's where things completely collapse. The deal went into effect in July of 95. By 97, Heroes World was out of business. And Marvel came back to the distribution channel, hat in hand. We're sorry. Will you distribute our comics again? And of course they have to say yes because they fucking need Marvel comics in their, to distribute. But by this point, it's too late. Capital City Comics, or excuse me, DC makes a deal with Diamond to be their distributor. And that is basically how we got to where we are today. I could stop right now, say nothing about the 2000s, nothing about the 2010s, and you would understand the story of the direct market. Because Capital City closes, because Diamond bought them in 96, Diamond won the war. Their exclusive deal with DC and a lot of distributors choosing to go under Diamond to basically sell to Diamond and not Capital City, put Capital City out of business.
And at that point, now those publishers have no choice.
Yeah.
But Diamond. Once Diamond's the only game in town, I guess, except Heroes World would have been at a year where they were Marvel's option. But yeah, that's a monopoly right there.
And it was a monopoly. It was a monopoly that was necessary at this point. There's nobody else.
Sure.
There's just nobody else.
And even Capital City is cannibalizing. You know, if DC were to keep splitting, like that would cannibalize that bit of money that's going around. Whereas they could just make one deal with Diamond and you know have a single income thing.
In a world where comics is publishing wise all over the place, a whole bunch of these wild series. I joked slapstick, Night Thrasher. Creatively, books like Heroes Reborn are coming out this time. So creatively, it's not really there. There needs, and then creatively, some creatives are leaving the big two. Diamond becoming a monopoly was at least one structure point in the foundation that kept it afloat, for better or for worse. Sure, that it then bears all of the weight of an industry, which then causes it to crack. But at least it was holding that industry up at this point.
Yeah, to what you just said, here's a quote from Steve Geppi. He said, to quote Stan Lee, with great power comes great responsibility. It suddenly became even more of a focus that the weight of the industry was on me personally, because any decision I make would be felt by a lot of people. So even at that point in time in 97, according to Steve Geppi, this interview that I just quoted from is more recent, but he was aware of the responsibility of Diamond having a monopoly.
Which is not untrue, but comparing yourself to Spider-Man and the hero of the story, it's like he thinks he is him. Which maybe at the time he was.
I mean, you're only the hero until you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
There we go, another overused superhero quote.
Yeah, we're gonna get more into Steve Geppi next week. But I mean, look, we can sit here and say whatever we want about him. Without him, if there's no Steve Geppi and there's no Diamond, then Capital City wins the war. Capital City was run by Milton Grepp, who does ICV2 right now, and he had a co-owner, and according to a lot of the research that I did and the historians like Paul Levitz who talked about this, Capital City was a pretty good company. The problem they had was they didn't have the relationships that Steve Geppi had. Geppi's biggest strength is his ability to build relationships with people. He's a very likable guy. Watch a Steve Geppi interview. You will meet him and you will like him. And he knew how to talk to people. People wanted to sell their distribution channels to him. They wanted to sell their warehouses to him. They trusted him. That's why he won the war.
And Milton, loses that and then starts ICB2, which then exposes the numbers of the industry.
Yeah. Well, he loves it. He's
Sure,
passionate about it. I haven't met Milton personally, but I did. I interacted with him once. Tyler did too, or at least you were there when it happened. Remember the ICV2 event we went to?
I think did Marco go to that one with you?
You weren't there? Oh, okay, you
Yeah.
weren't there. Yeah. So Marco and I very very briefly got to meet him. Seems nice. Not a cult of personality, so to speak.
And at the end of the day, comics is a bit of a carny business. So you need a ringleader.
Every business is, though.
Sure. Yeah.
Every business, the people who rise to the top are the people that know how to schmooze. They know
Yeah.
how to talk. They know how to draw you in, especially in a business of sales. You have to be somebody who can sell. And what are you selling first? You.
And Phil Schilling was that at the time too.
Yep,
Yep. Big time.
exactly. Atomic Hound with a 9.99 drop. Thank you so much. I know we got a couple other super chats too. We'll get to those in a moment. Want to make a small fortune in comics? Well, you start with a large fortune.
A small loan from your dad of 100,000. Yeah.
Oh my god, that's hilarious. That is funny. And then might as well hit one of the other ones. I know we got one from Hayden, but it's very off topic, so I don't want to hit that quite yet. Ben Loudly said, I remember seeing a $30 copy of Wildcats #1 at a local comic shop as a kid in '96. Less than 10 years, you could get the entire run for that on eBay. That's crazy.
Which just tells you, just wait. Just wait it out. Do you need it now?
Do you?
I don't know.
I say eat shit to the speculators who bought that book and thought it was going to be so valuable, only to have to sell it on eBay for pennies on the dollar. Fuck you. You got what you deserve.
Are there any comics that you thought would be, or any collectibles you thought would be valuable that you own that it's just aren't now?
No, dude, I've never bought anything with that purpose. Never, ever.
Anything.
Yeah.
Not even like a
Never.
Vigi
Nothing.
game, nothing.
Nothing.
Trading cards
I only have ever bought cards to play.
to play competitively. Okay. You really do hate
Yeah.
speculators.
I buy things to have them. Like I collect Pokemon cards in different languages. But like I like them.
Well, the
Right.
Japanese cards are stronger.
Well, yeah, we don't talk about that though. I mean,
Yeah, even if you buy Pokemon cards or baseball cards or whatever because you love that thing, that's valid. Far be it for me to tell anybody how to live their life. I just feel like the speculator game is look, people want to
bullshit.
yeah,
Like
it is bullshit. It is. People want to supplement their income. They don't want to have a real job. That's all well and good, but I think in this case it did a lot of damage to comics. I truly believe that. I don't think it's disputable, quite frankly. So when I talk shit about speculators and you know, that whole market, this is where that's coming from. I don't like YouTube channels that are based around all that shit because it's incentivizing and pushing forward something that is toxic to comics. I don't think it's good for new comic book fans to come into the industry and think that it's a way to make money. I think that's misguided. It's not a way to make money. Like, you're not going to make money doing this.
nope.
I mean, Logan Paul has a fucking Charizard around his neck that's worth a boatload of money, and there will occasionally be things like that that are worthwhile, but nothing print. What the fuck are you selling that was printed after 1990 that's worth a ton of money?
Yeah. So all right, so it's that thing. It's also just like, why? Why
Yeah.
is
Put
Logan
my-
Paul's stupid
Well,
Charizard worth $500? Who cares?
it's all based
Don't
on.
say well. You know I'm right.
Well, it's all based on availability of it, and I don't want to have something.
Go get a new one.
Just
Who
reprint
cares?
it. Just reprint it.
Sure.
It shouldn't be the case, and this is, I gotta get off this rant, but I'm angry about this.
Sure.
It shouldn't be the case that in order for someone who wants to get a Switch 2 or, you know, a PS5 or a pair of sneakers that they really like, that they have to fight these idiots who only want to buy it so that they can sell you the exact same thing for double the price.
It's like Turbo Man in Jingle All the Way. Just people grabbing it to resell them. When your kid who doesn't like you that much, who really wants one.
Well, in that movie, they were buying them for the fucking kids.
Wasn't
That's a real thing. That Jingle All the Way story is representative of what it was really like.
oh yeah,
Tickle Me Elmo, baby.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
Tickle your what?
that was big in my house. Tickle Me Elmo.
Oh, same.
My big one was the Batmobile. That was the one that I
Mm.
wanted. There was a Batmobile for I think it was for returns, um, and it was a hot commodity, and they had to beat old ladies with sticks to get me a fucking to get me a Batmobile at that time.
I think ours was Buzz Lightyear. And that one came out.
I remember the Wii. That was a big one.
Yeah,
The Wii.
yeah. But with all of those things, it was people organically wanting them for their kids.
Sure. Yeah.
Who all of this is supposed to be about.
But Sean,
Originally.
if I don't buy this issue of a comic book that's gonna be worthwhile, my kids won't be able to go to college. It's an investment.
Yeah, that's
James points out speculation's done a lot of damage to the housing
This
market
is
too.
true.
sure.
Yep.
So much. I mean, well, we're comics fans, so we're not gonna be able to buy houses anyway. So you know.
Listen, I went to college, so I'm not gonna be able to buy a house or eat or
Or anything.
Yeah.
oh, sorry, I trailed off because I was hungry because I had to pay my student loans this week.
I want to read one more quote from Steve Jeppy, and then we will wrap this because the government came for Steve pretty quickly, Steve and Diamond pretty quickly to take a look at them for monopoly reasons. And this is what Steve had to say. There was a number of retailers and publishers, not that I know of any specifically, who were cooperating with the Justice Department. They really didn't look at Diamond specifically. They were looking at the comic book industry as a whole and how did it get to being one distributor. But when they did their homework, the Justice Department, they saw that we were innocent because we didn't cause this to happen. The concept of exclusivity was pretty much a natural progression given what had happened. So they said that that we were a monopoly, but that we were benign. We weren't hurting anybody. It was actually argued that consolidation was good for the industry. I mean, I understand there were people not that didn't like not having other choices, but the economics, the economies of scale were brought to the table at a time when the industry was half sizing. I remember in 1993 when Diamond was already the largest distributor. We were deemed to be 44% of the market. At the peak of Death of Superman and everything else they were doing to drive people to the market, Diamond had done $222 million of business at 44% of the market. We become the only distributor and we're doing 168 million. That's how big the market shrunk. So the concept was the industry was fragile. There needed to be some consolidation. At the end of the day, we the consumer, it's our fault. The reason we have Walmart and Amazon is because we want the best thing at the cheapest price. And the only way to provide that is through volume. And as a result, that happened in our industry. There wasn't enough volume to keep everyone afloat. Now, that comes from Steve Jeppy, who did an interview on the Dan Shaheen YouTube channel. Um, very, very good interviews. I had a blast listening to them and transcribing them. But that's what Dan had to say. Or Steve had to say, excuse me. He said something else that I thought was hilarious though. And it's a much larger quote. I extrapolated one bit because I thought it was apropos for today. He said, "We've never done something so onerous or illegal."
Hell yeah, Carney.
Fucking liar! What's happening right now with Diamond?
Right.
With that deposit that Alliance put in.
I think he's still waiting to find out if he can get away with that.
Yeah. Which so far looks like he has.
Time will tell. Time will tell. You know what? I know I just said we were done. I forgot one last critical bit that we cannot finish this without, which is that when DC and Diamond signed their deal for DC to be exclusive with Diamond, um, there was a clause in place that essentially made it so that DC could buy Diamond.
Okay.
that if certain things occurred, DC had the ability to purchase Diamond outright. This reality and the relationship between DC and Diamond led a lot of people to believe that, in a way, Diamond treated DC like the boss, and DC treated Diamond like an underling.
I mean, I have an image of Steve Jeppy out here with previews all around him, and guess what's on the cover of previews every single issue? DC.
Yeah.
DC.
Huh. And then did this stay even when DC was bought out?
Bought up by who?
Or sorry, since they're owned by Warner, DC can still. Is this still a clause?
I mean, DC's been owned by Warner for
Sure, yeah. So I guess
forever,
this
way
would have been
longer.
around. Yeah.
That clause, DC and Diamond they don't have that business relationship anymore anyway.
Sure.
But that clause was written out of the contract.
Got it.
Whenever they re-signed it, I think it was in the 2010s. But yeah,
But definitely
Probably
smelled
why-
funny. Yeah.
Probably why they set up their own distribution, in the 20s.
yeah, it's very funny that DC ended their relationship with Diamond the way that they did, considering how close they were to owning Diamond altogether.
Yep.
The industry crashed. Ashes are left. The players who survived are all clear. Image, or excuse me, Diamond, Marvel, DC, and the publishers. That's what's left. The distribution channel that thrived throughout the 80s that we talked about at length, all gone. There are no other distributors. How did that affect the industry? And how did the industry manage to bounce back? How is it possible that after this big of a collapse, we still talk about comics 30 years later? We'll answer that question in the finale of our direct market deep dive next week.
From the Ashes era.
A, is the comeback bigger than the setback? That's what Steve Jeppy said would happen in 2020 after the pandemic. So this was a setback. What was the comeback like? We'll talk about that.
Yeah, he lived through it once. He can live through it again.
Yep. Oh man. Oh man.
Kurt says, I think I've said this before, but ever since DC started doing their own distribution, they don't sell TPBs to bookstores here in South Africa anymore. Interesting.
Oh wow. Huh. Gavin Guidry says, "Don't hate on From the Ashes. There was at least one good issue. I'll give you that."
You know what?
And
He's right.
and I
And that was
argue
a good issue.
I would argue on a micro, From the Ashes is good, on a macro it's bad. But we've talked about that ad nauseum. That's a whole different show.
Sean, earlier, Shub says, can I just say, in preparation for part 2 of this episode, I watched around 6 to 7 hours of the New 52 deep dive in 2 days. Could I have watched Sinners and Thunderbolts? Yes. Did I choose to? No.
Wow. Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you. That means a lot to me, and that was a fun time. That was a very fun time for us. So I hope you enjoyed looking
Dude,
back
man.
at that.
Also, I apologize. Just in case any of us said anything stupid in those episodes. Who knows? Probably me.
Listen, I can't defend anything. Don't apologize. I didn't. I don't remember it. What can I?
All right. We've got a lot more show to do somehow, some way. But we do have to carry on. And so now we need to talk about our top 5 villains. Number 4 and number 3, our book club this month is based around Villains Month. In part due to Thunderbolts. And so we thought we could run through our top 5 villains, the villains we love the most, in preparation for the book club. Now, the poll is up on our Patreon page, patreon.com/thecomicspals. Anybody, any supporting member of the Patreon can cast their vote. We need a lot more votes than what we have, and a lot more people are eligible to vote than have voted so far. So get your votes in if you know you're eligible. Dark Avengers is an option. Empire by Mark Waid and Barry Kitson is an option. Red Lanterns from the New 52 era is an option. And Lex Luthor, Man of Steel. That rounds out your options for this month. Get your vote on. Go ahead, Cale.
What are you guys hoping for?
Dark Avengers.
Dark Avengers, yeah.
Oh, kind of hoping for Red Lanterns, actually. I've read Dark Avengers.
Yeah, I've not read it since it was out, though, is the thing. Which I guess could be a detriment. Taste change.
In a way, I would like to read Red Lanterns because I keep hearing really good things about it. Like I went from never hearing about it at all to all of a sudden I feel like I hear about it all the time.
Yeah.
But man, I want that comfort food. I know I love Dark Avengers. I want to read it again. It could win.
How do you read that without reading Thunderbolts, though? Like that, how did Ellis's Thunderbolts not make the cut? I guess it was just too wide of a theme.
It got one nom.
Damn.
I thought it would take the plate. Like I thought that would be more likely to make the cut than Dark Avengers would.
Sure. As we learned,
but,
Avengers is a bigger name than Thunderbolts.
Indeed. Kurt Wildshut says, yeah, Dark Avengers is peak Bendis and peak Mike Diodato.
Ooh, it is good Diodato. Yeah.
Yeah, completely agree. Thanks for the kind words, Hound. Yeah, so are you guys ready with your number 4 and 3?
Yeah, I can go.
Yep.
You want me to just do my 4 and 3? Or we're going to cycle around? Okay. So number 4 is, and Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think this book was even nominated for Villain Month. But it is a Marvel Max book by Brian K. Vaughan and Kyle Hotz. It created one of my favorite comic book villains of all time, and it's Parker Robbins, also known as the Hood.
Oh yeah.
The Hood is such a homegrown Marvel villain. He's a goon that gets powers, really. He's a nobody. He's that character that's the world outside your window that is so low level the superheroes don't even pay attention to him. And he just stumbles across the ability to get this hood, this cape that's possessed by a demon who gives him demonic powers to rival even like Doctor Strange at some points. And the idea that like he is just a cunning little guy who knows that and has that built into his DNA that helps him control the underworld to like Kingpin levels at some points. In so much as he wields the Infinity Gauntlet by Bendis' run in Avengers, which I thought that was a little too much. But I love Parker Robbins. I think he's super compelling. Most recently, he was in the most recent Ghost Rider run. There was a Ghost Rider mini that kind of capped off. Was it Ben Percy's run, Sean? Or
sure.
I forget. It's recent. It was really good. Even though it dealt with vampires as well. It was during Blood Hunt. Yeah, I just think he's a really compelling character. He's fallible. He makes mistakes, and he's a shitheel. Like it's not that he's redeeming. His humanity is redeeming, but his humanity is also what makes him screw up a lot. And I think that's why I like him. I find him compelling because he does screw up, and then there's a lot of comeback and setback. But the Hood is my number 4. My number 3 is another person probably more famously wielding the Infinity Gauntlet, and that's Thanos. Design. Thanos' design is iconic. Purple guy, crinkly chin. But also like just the idea that this guy was a supervillain that destroyed half of all existence. Because my man was simping for a goth girl. Relatable. I get it. Understandable. And that's why I like him. I think, I like Infinity Gauntlet. I prefer his reasoning in the comic more than I do film.
Yeah.
I think it's stupider in the comic, but I like it more. And then like since then, he's kind of just this cunning, king-like villain that just wants to control. And a lot of the times, it's because of the idea of death and appeasing it. So for a guy who wants to control everything, it's for something that's out of his control, and that's affection that he does not get. Yeah, he's got mommy issues. Jason Aaron did a really good Thanos kind of origin story that I would recommend. I think Simone Bianchi is on art with that. And then there's the Donny Cates, Thanos wins story, which is also great. Yeah, Thanos is my number 3.
I think my picks today are almost the opposite of Tyler's. So my number 4 is Darkseid. And I like Darkseid so much more than I like Thanos. I think Thanos is, especially at this point, overplayed. And the way with going back into the Fourth World Omnibus and getting to see Darkseid sort of from his origin, he's basically been the same character for 60 years. This is a dude that just sits on his throne, looks menacingly, and is after one thing, and he's gonna be the most absolute evil bastard about it. And it just rules. He shows up in thigh-high horse riding boots, and he, zaps people out of existence. And listen, what else could you want?
And he shows up that cunty little skirt too.
That's what I'm saying. But he's so like, and I've said this a couple of times before, but he shows up as sort of like, in the first couple issues of I think it's Jimmy Olsen, as sort of this. He seems like he's mustache twirly, and you only see him through like computer screens and stuff like that. But then, like, when you see him for the first time, and he does the thing and then bounces, and then you get to New Gods, and it's like, oh no, this dude has made an entire empire under the Earth's crust. He's on a completely different planet, and he's looking for something to wipe out the existence of Earth. It's just, and like, he's just so, there's gravity to Darkseid always. And it's so good. I love Darkseid. Darkseid is easily one of the best.
Roboter says Darkseid never saw a chair he did not sit in. It's true.
And fucking owned.
Yep.
On the other side, Magneto is my number 3.
You mean a hero?
Well, now, I like Magneto very specifically because when he started out, he was so anti-human, and I think what makes him sort of so high on this list is that the journey he's had, and maybe even the journey we've had as a society, is this journey of like, no, absolutely anyone who's against me is wrong, and I'm going to kill them. All the way to, okay, maybe they're not wrong, and I don't have to like them, but if we work together, maybe I don't have to kill them. Like, he's still an asshole about everything, but he's right, and more people are seeing it. And I just think that Magneto, he's one of the few villains from his inception who has stood for something real and stuck to his guns. Like he has always known, listen, mutant or not, like you can't do this shit to me. Period. You're gonna mess with my people, you're out. And now he's coming around to, okay, we can make the world work together, but I'm not gonna tolerate this bullshit either. I love it. So yeah, Darkseid and Magneto.
All right. For my number 4, I'm going to choose another big robot. I'm going with the Sentinel. So obviously there are lots of Sentinels. Sentinels are just a factory produced machine. I'm choosing the concept of the Sentinel. Um, One of the first things that scared me as a kid was the Sentinel. I remember the X-Men animated series two-parter, The Night of the Sentinel, where it starts off with Jubilee in an arcade, which felt so, normal and regular to me, and then she's being hunted down by this murderous robot machine that only has eyes for her. It's Terminator-esque, but on a massive scale. And I was horrified by that idea that this thing goes after kids. I'm like, shit, is a Sentinel gonna go after me? Um, and all that it took for the X-Men to take down Sentinels during that first season, it made them seem, you know, larger than life. It made them seem impossible to kill. It made them seem so deadly and dangerous. And the fact that they were an arm of a racist. Like the Sentinels are literally just the machine of a
Yeah.
racist. That scared me deeply. And it still does in a way. Not that I think that Sentinels are going to start walking around. Just the idea that there was something that someone was so hateful that they created something that destructive and that scary and that manipulatable. Because how many times do the owners of the Sentinels get shit turned around on them, like by Master Mold and things like that? Um, it's a horrifying possibility and a horrifying reality for the X-Men and all mutants.
Even in like House of Powers, where it kind of hits its natural conclusion, where like they become sentient, and now humans are also in their view. Like it's no, they are the only ones. The robots are the only ones that need to be the dominant race.
Yeah,
It's the
yeah.
Frankenstein situation.
I love the way House and Powers took that and took it further.
Okay, so I know it's Sentinels as design is your pick. Is there a certain Sentinel you like most?
I love Master Mold. Seeing him sitting in that
Big
fucking
ol' head.
chair in the animated series, look, he looked, first of all, he always reminded me of a woman getting her hair done because he
Yes.
has that massive thing on his head, and I was like, that reminds me of my aunt, like when she's doing her hair. But he sits in that chair, doesn't get up, and just sentinels just come out of him. Like what the fuck? He's just he's a sentinel and a factory.
I think they call it aura farming at this point. He's just sitting there
Hell yeah.
looking cool.
Yep. Oh my god, dude! If you've never seen those episodes, season 1 of X-Men the Animated Series, where they go to fight the Master Mold, man, oh, woof.
I kind of wish we would have gotten more of the Tri Sentinel, but that's just me.
Nimrod. How could I
Oh,
forget? Thank you,
Nimrod.
Kurt
Yeah.
Wildstone.
Yeah.
Nimrod is scary as fuck because Nimrod is just unkillable, and he's from the future. And like, how do you beat that?
And you got the hot one, Omega Sentinel.
Hell yeah. And then my number 3 is Venom. Venom has been a hero way, way longer than he was ever a villain. That sucks to me. To me, in a perfect world where creativity is the only thing that motivates decision making, Venom was one and done, maybe two and done, because the strength of concept is more powerful than the storytelling that has come since. Venom is starts as a symbiote uh, alien that Spider-Man gets, and it's just a new costume on Battleworld. And then he brings it home, and all these problems start happening in his life. He's angrier. He's having arguments with his wife, Mary Jane. You know, people are questioning what's going on with Peter. He's hostile. And he comes to learn that it's because of the alien. But he likes it. He likes the power. He's seduced by it. And then when he finally gets rid of it, now it hates him. Now it develops a vendetta. Now it's on sight. But how? How to strike revenge. It links up with someone who also needs revenge against Spider Man, and that's Eddie Brock. And the two together create a hate monster that ruins Peter's life for a period of time. The fact that Venom was stalking Mary Jane, that it was following her around, that it was watching her through the windows, not doing anything, no intention to even hurt her, because on some level it is Peter and it loves Mary Jane, but it wants to destroy their lives. And it takes everything Spider Man has, it takes help from the Fantastic Four to put Venom down. It's a perfect predator for Spider Man. It doesn't trigger his spider sense. I love everything about those initial Venom issues. And I'm not going to say I hate what's come since, but if that was all Venom ever was, I would be perfectly happy with that character's journey and story. I love Venom.
Roboters points out that the original symbiote Brock Venom was the perfect dark mirror to Spider-Man.
Yep.
And I also just like from my introduction to Venom was easily the Spider-Man animated series, but like even that is such like a perfect capsule story of the Venom concept and like that dark villain dark mirror idea.
Yeah.
It's so executed so well that it's almost a shame he's become what he is.
I don't think that there's anything that they could ever do with Venom that will hit those highs. And obviously, a lot of people are going to disagree with that. They're going to talk about Donny Cates and Stegman, and all that stuff's good comics. I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying that Venom had a place that he doesn't have anymore.
Yeah, the terror that symbiote held, like for me in those episodes where like Spider-Man doesn't know what to do, and he has to like turn, in one of the rare times of that show where he has to turn to, one of his superhero allies. Like, yeah, I don't think they could ever get that back for Venom.
It's funny. My intro to Venom was Marvel vs. Capcom 2, where I thought he was blue this whole time. And then, like in comics, when I started reading, it wasn't Eddie Brock. It was Matt Gargan. Yep. Matt Gargan was my Venom, who was horrifying because Mac was essentially a flesh suit who couldn't even control the symbiote, and it was just monstrous at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes I think about Venom and I'm like, what a shame. What a shame. Shu Patel says his top 5 are Magus or Magus, Namor, Clayface, Mongol, and Loki. Wow.
Ooh, Mongol's a good one.
You go from Magus to Clayface. You're going for like high space Marvel to low on the ground Batman.
Luna says number 5 Punchline. I was very surprised about. Number 4 Madeline Pryor, and number 3 Scarecrow.
I did a podcast appearance. I think it was on Near Mint. Yeah, it was on Near Mint. And someone was telling me that they were like, Punchline's not popular. No, who cares about Punchline?
Incorrect.
Way fucking wrong. Yeah. All the way. It wasn't Omar. It was one of the other people. And it's like, dude, you're out of touch, dude. You don't know what's going on anymore. If you think Punchline isn't popular, you just don't know what you're talking about.
I don't know what I'm talking about. Enlighten me.
No, Punchline blew up. In fact, Punchline probably definitely is the biggest character to come out of the James Tynion
100%. Yeah.
Batman run.
I could have told you that with my little bit of knowledge.
DC didn't. They tried to like blow her up, but it felt inorganic, and so it didn't, like, the material that they were pumping out wasn't working for the character. But online, there is a huge groundswell of support and fandom for Punchline. In fact, the most successful video we have ever released has Punchline as the centerpiece character on it.
That's true on the thumbnail. Yeah, I made sure Punchline was pretty prominent on that. Yeah. I think it was about new characters, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. And when we did that video, so many of the comments were about Punchline.
Are they buying stuff? Who knows? But she is popular.
Well, they continue to trot her out. She's in the impending Birds of Prey.
And she was in the previous Birds of Prey by Leah Williams.
Yep.
And Leah Williams wrote a really fun Punchline.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Love that.
Honestly, man, I would kill for Leah Williams to write that character more.
Listen, I would kill for Lee Williams.
It's true.
Me too. Me too.
All right, Gooner alert.
Hey.
Shoob says, Cale, Sasha from Casually Comics has several videos to catch you up to speed for her popularity. No thanks.
Hey, Sasha's awesome.
Yeah, that's not a shot at Sasha at all. At all. I think I've seen a few of her videos actually.
Yeah.
Recently one I think about the Flash.
But the Flash interests you more than Punchline.
Way. I'm not interested in understanding why things are popular right now.
Samuel Summers shares his. He says number 1, Ultimate Osborne, Ultimate Doc Ock, and Violator. Yo,
Wow.
dude, props for choosing Violator. I fucking love Violator. I haven't read enough comics to rank him, but he was amazing in the movie, the Spawn movie. John Leguizamo did an amazing job. And in the animated series, he's awesome. And in the very few Spawn comics I've read with him in them, the Violator is creepy as fuck.
Yep.
My cousin had a Violator action figure growing up, and he used to scare the shit out of me.
Why?
They were big at the time.
Ultimate Norman Osborn also is a great pick. I think in that initial run, Norman of Bendis's Ultimate Spider-Man, Norman Osborn was such a real visceral threat to Peter because the Goblin was so bestial. Another one where reading volume 4 where he throws Mary Jane off the bridge in the back of my grandparents' Lincoln in New Mexico. It was like it's like a top 10 like formative memory that I have.
Steve.
Oh, entertain me with the $2. What Venom did to Black Cat? He brutalized her bad. Yes, like Venom did fucked up things, and I feel like, to me, man, I don't know. I feel like villains today don't do screwed up things enough. Like I want to see some bad stuff. I'm not talking about fridging. I'm talking about like just, creepy shit.
I remember it was Remender's run on Venom, where he made Jack-O-Lantern do fucked up shit, like you said, which then like made Jack-O-Lantern a legit villain for me. I was like, oh shit, this dude is legit. He was a joke character, and now he's not.
100%. I'm with you 100% on that. Steve Canaris says Cyborg Superman, Loki, the Corinthian, Hobgoblin, and Captain Cold.
Corinthian's a good pick.
I like Cyborg Superman a lot. Design more than anything, but yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think I know the Corinthian.
From Sandman, the guy with the teeth.
Oh yeah, that guy.
The teeth eyes. Yeah.
Yeah, he's messed up.
Monster Design says Doctor Doom, Doc Ock, Mr. Freeze, Two-Face, and Hobgoblin. I love the Hobgoblin representation. Love it.
Animated series did work for him too.
More than Green Goblin, actually.
Yeah.
I never watched the animated series, so I know nothing about Hobgoblin, and he does nothing for me.
You gotta watch the animated series, bro.
If they do a revival, then it'll give me a reason to. But.
Third rail, what is this gimmick, bro? I'm not understanding. What is the gimmick?
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
Cale's an ostrich, Tyler's a brain, and apparently
Yeah, they
I
used to
look
call
like an enforcer. No one has ever in my life said that I look like an enforcer of anything.
they used to call the brain something else when I went to an all guys high school.
Hmm.
That's what they would. They would be like, "Yo, check out the brain." You turn over and they're bent over with their balls hanging out the back.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Wow, nice. Love that. Um, all right, we got to move the show along. We are gonna have to take a sledgehammer to our news portion
lightning
because
round coming up.
yeah, it has been 3 hours. I really want to just briefly talk about the Jonathan Hickman interview that came out this week. He did it with Sketched. Um, Off panel is the podcast. David Harper is the one that runs Sketched and runs Off panel. Great guy. Great interviewer. Great insights.
Good hair.
If I, yeah, if I have it my way, you will see David Harper on this channel soon. But I am jealous of him, and I will tell him that one day because I am jealous that he got an interview with Jonathan Hickman. Um, he has a few. They've done a few together, so that's why he's able to get this. And John said some stuff. He said some things that have the internet abuzz. I've been spending my time wondering why people are abuzz because so much of what he said, he's already said or was just knowable.
Even Bleeding Cool is like Jonathan Hickman goes on podcasts to confirm things we've already told you.
Right. Exactly. Um, he talked about a lot of things, and we can tackle them. He talked about how I want to lead with the X-Men. He talked about how that's the most creatively disappointing thing that he has done in his career because he didn't finish it. He wasn't able to finish it. And it was interesting to hear him talk so many years removed from, and we're really not even that many years removed. It's been 3 years or so. Talk about how bummed out he is about it. And it didn't sound like I'm angry at Marvel. It sounded like he was personally upset, like with himself, for how it went. Um, he talked about how, the situations at the time, the pandemic playing a big part in it, the separation of the creators from each other, from the home base, from the the offices, um, how all of those factors contributed to him not being able to finish. And other projects that Marvel wanted him to do that he just couldn't stick around. Look, Marvel's not going to say, "Hey, Jonathan Hickman, we're taking you off X-Men." They're going to say, "Hey, here are all these projects we want you to do." He could do them all. Marvel would be happy if Jonathan Hickman took a fucking handcuff, put it on himself, attached it to a radiator, and sat there and wrote all day. They would be very pleased with that, but that's not going to happen. So Jonathan Hickman has to um, measure himself in terms of what projects he takes on and what he does. And what I extrapolated from the interview was there was no way to do what he needed to do for Marvel outside of X-Men and do X-Men the way that the people and the X line wanted it done.
And the reason, the previously stated reason that he left was because like the people that were doing the X books at the time wanted to kind of still play in that sandbox, and he wanted to extend further, right?
Yeah.
It's a little bit of both. Like
Yeah.
he's said, you know, what he said here and the way Sean put it out, but he's also said that as well. So I think both things are true. Like, Marvel wanted him to move along,
Yeah.
and so he wanted to push forward with the X-Men and get his narrative out, but the people in the room didn't want to.
Right. Exactly. And he always stops short of blame. And I respect that a lot. I'm sure. Look, there's no way that he doesn't have some sour grapes
Sure.
about the way that all went down. But he never blames the other creators. He never blames editorial. He never blames anybody. He puts it on himself and says, ultimately, it was my job to tell a story, and I didn't finish it. And I feel bad about that. And Cole said it, and Cole in the chat is right. He sounds sad and
Yeah.
disappointed, genuinely. And
Yeah, he
that,
says
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to read that comment. Sorry. He says, I feel like you could hear Hickman's disappointment and sadness in his voice about the X-Men on the podcast. I also get the sense he's a company man and happy to play that role.
Well, I'm sure he gets paid the most out of any creator at Marvel. That's for sure.
100%.
Well,
I mean,
there are
his-
four
yeah, his-
creators
his-
at Marvel right now, so
And it's also his books probably are cost twice as much. But yeah, I get that same sense too. And, once he talked to the Ultimate line, you can see he's that. Because he pretty much says that like he was chosen to take up the reins of that. It wasn't his idea.
Yeah, Hickman. I've been saying for years that Hickman has taken on the role of like a hitman or a
Yeah.
mercenary. He
Hickman the
is
Hitman.
Marvel's hired gun. They pay him the big bucks to establish whatever they need established or get over whatever they want to get over. And you can see it. It's clear as day. Like look at what he's doing with Imperial. He talked about how Imperial is a very similar thing to what was done with Ultimate, what was done with House and Powers, but he learned a lot from his experience with House and Powers. And so he does it a little differently now. It's very apparent to me that Hickman is not going to show run the Marvel Cosmic, just like he's not show running Ultimate. He tried that with X-Men, it didn't work, so he's not doing that again. But he will come in and establish a sandbox for other creators to play in. That's what Ultimate is, and that's what Imperial is.
And he said that Imperial seems to be more creatively satisfying for him. I think, and I don't know if it was this interview, but previous to this, or like it's actually got me excited for Imperial, hearing him talk about it. He mentioned like part of what he didn't get to tell the story of at during X-Men was the whole Cannonball and Sunspot stuff with the Imperial Guard, and a lot of I think creatively a lot of those threads are going to be told in Imperial in some way or fashion, or at least pulled on.
He actually said in the interview that he probably won't be doing a lot of that. That the stuff that he wanted to do with the Imperial Guard and with those particular characters, he's not going to go back to. He said that when he finishes a project,
Okay.
it's over, and he doesn't. If he doesn't like everything he has, he gives to the project, and that's it. So I wouldn't expect him to carry over any threats.
I like how you said when he finishes a project. Okay, still waiting on a couple.
so there's hope.
Yeah,
He also talked about how like he'll probably it wasn't even really probably, it was like pretty definitive. He doesn't like going backwards. So we'll never see his conclusion to the X stuff. He's never going to do Fantastic Four again. And someone could say, "Oh, well that's bullshit because he's doing X-Men right now in Avengers versus Aliens." Yeah, I mean they are characters that exist within Marvel,
yeah,
but he's not doing X-Men. He's not telling his X-Men story.
His thoughts on Ultimate, does that change your view on the Ultimate line at all? How he was pretty much a third option for Spider-Man?
We knew that.
I know, but like, does that make you less, or like, does that affect your thoughts on the book at all?
No,
me.
no. Putting aside the fact that we've known it, he's telling his story. I have nothing to compare it to. You know, this is the story that Hickman has to tell, and to illuminate for everybody who isn't aware of what Tyler's talking about, Hickman said in the interview that Donny Cates was originally supposed to launch the Ultimate line. That is something that was in the rumor mill for a long time. People did not believe it. And that goes as far back as 2018, 2019, when they started having those conversations. Obviously, everything that happened in Donnie's life led to him not being able to do it. And so Hickman was tapped to step in and kind of create that sandbox. It's not the story that Donnie would have told what we ultimately got. I don't think it's a story Hickman would have told if he was in from the ground level. So it's a weird mishmash of different people's ideas. And I think that's probably why the Ultimate Universe book, Ultimate Invasion, is a weird one. But ultimately, again, he's not saying anything new, so I don't have new thoughts about it.
And the story that's there, like, we can only speak to what's in the text, so it's just not working for the people it's not working for. For others, it's working great. So
Speaking of which, Hickman addressed the criticisms of Ultimate Spider-Man, which I was pretty surprised by. He talked about the monthly release schedule. In fact, he talked about it the way we talk about it. And he said, hey, we tried something. It's not for everybody. It's not something that I probably would want to do again or think that the company should emulate going forward. But it's working for some people, and we gave it a shot, and it's been fun to do. So I thought that was a pretty honest, sober response to criticism that we have lobbed at the book, and that I think is fair whether you like the book or not.
You think they ditch it once the moment's gone, once the maker's back?
It's hard to imagine there's a reason to keep it.
Well, can you ditch it if it's so ingrained in what the book is?
Of course you can.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. And I think if something like Ultimates were to keep it, and we had a different countdown or something,
Sure,
I think that would work. But something like Spider-Man desperately needs to get rid of it. But it's like it's an experiment, and it just doesn't seem to me, again, it doesn't seem like it's just working to be an effective tool for storytelling in this book.
Yeah. Do you guys... So Hickman himself is now saying basically what his job is at Marvel is to sort of, be a mercenary, establish things they want to establish and everything like that. Do you guys think that's the best use of Jonathan Hickman?
Nope.
No. There's I understand the reliability of Hickman being a hitman. Like, hey, Donnie can't do this anymore. We need you to step in. You've had experience relaunching things and building a sandbox. We need that experience. I get that. From a skills to necessary vacuum perspective, it makes sense. I would love it if Hickman could just do his thing.
Yeah.
And I wonder where Gods exists in this whole scheme of things. Because that felt like Hickman doing his thing. And for all intents and purposes, it didn't really, outside of variants, it didn't really extend anywhere. It was kind of its own thing, siloed. Or only now slowly getting more of them, I think, in a One World or Doom one-shot. So I'll be curious to know how that existed, if that was Hickman's thing, or they want to lead it into magic because of the movies and all that stuff. But I would prefer Hickman be able to just do Hickman stuff. There's a part of me that's like, if I'm like, all right, Hickman gets to do that sandbox creation and that Genesis again, I'm like, I know he's done it already before, but I think Avengers could use him again.
Yeah, he talked about not really wanting to.
He doesn't want to go backwards
that
though.
either.
Yeah. So what's left for him at Marvel, really? I don't know.
Yeah, I just think it's like there's got to be an element to that that's creatively draining,
Stifling.
like
for
I'm sure they're letting him do close to whatever he wants, but it's within the parameters of we need this thing now, and that has to suck. Instead of like him going, "Ooh, I had this really great idea for X-Men, let me do an X-Men thing." Marvel has to come in to him and say, well, we've got a bunch of people bitching about how Spider-Man's not married anymore. How about you do that? It's like, obviously that's not the case that happened here, but my broader point is that it's fulfilling what Marvel needs or thinks they need to affect their bottom line, instead of allowing him to be creative and take a shot, which will grant a chance for more organic storytelling, but also more organic fan reaction.
And if he doesn't want to go backwards, I think he's done, after this Imperial thing, I think he's done everything in Marvel. Like, name a corner of the Marvel universe he hasn't touched.
Yeah,
it's true. He actually, David Harper did a great job with this interview, because he actually sort of asked Hickman this very question. And Hickman said that he does feel creatively fulfilled. He talked about how, you know, having to do corporate comics in the corporate way um, can be a little bit, tricky. But ultimately, he does find spaces where he gets to do what interests him, and he's reached the point of his career where if he doesn't have an idea, and if it seems like it's going to be annoying to have to do whatever it is that's put in front of him, he just says no. Um, and that stuff like Gods, that was originally a TV show that was supposed to be for Marvel TV, and then it got turned into this comic book. And so, in a lot of ways, that's a baby of Hickman's. Um, but he said that creatively, he has things coming that he's very excited about that are more for him. You Tyler, you'll be very familiar with this, loving movies. The idea of like one for them, one for me, right?
Exactly. That's what Bong Joon-ho did. Parasite. That was for him, and then he gets the big money to do a big sci-fi thing for Warner, and then he does
Right.
Mickey 17, which was also for him, but like there's a reason.
Yeah.
The whole Ben Affleck as Batman, was originally I scratch your back, you scratch mine.
Sydney Sweeney with Madam
Madam
Web.
Yep.
Great film.
A film.
Christopher Nolan, that's how he was able to make Inception, by doing the Batman stuff.
Yeah.
So I respect that. He's doing business. And he's doing good business for himself and his family, but
Certainly.
he's also doing good business for Marvel. And we always talk about wanting to see creators get paid. So I'm happy that he's been able to build a life for himself that's very successful on the back of his work at Marvel.
I do not fault any writer for getting steady work and steady health insurance.
Yeah. Yeah. I wish that other writers could get the same gig.
Yeah, for sure. Common Sense with 4.99. Hickman's God supposedly explores Marvel's world of magic, but he hasn't touched Spellbinders. You pals know Spellbinders by Mike Carey. They're in 616.
Don't worry, Common Sense. We know Spellbinders by Mike Carey.
Oh yeah, Spellbinders by Mike Carey. Yeah, right, Sean.
They're in 616.
Yes, I am spellbound by them. I can't believe how
Oh,
much
be
I
careful.
know them and love them.
There was another Common Sense super chat earlier on for 199. My thing froze, so there we go. He said Hickman bringing back Hiro Kala, Scar's twin bro. I guess an Imperial.
Cool.
I guess that the Hulk realm is where he hasn't touched, but now he's doing Hulk and Cosmic in the same in space in the same go.
Right. Yeah.
That means the creative book that he hasn't done yet. Howard the Duck by Jonathan Hickman. Let's go.
It's also worth remembering that he does have the one world, one moon thing. And he talked about how
Yeah.
fun that has been and, exciting. And he talked about how he wished there's more comics out and stuff like that. But like he gets a lot of his energy for that kind of thing out through that channel. So
Pete Collins says, for FYI, Hickman will be at my local show, Terrificon, in Connecticut in August. Smaller crowds, maybe an opportunity for you guys to get an interview. That's at Mohegan Sun, is it? I could be wrong on that one. Hey, I got a car.
I would absolutely travel to interview Hickman. In fact, before I fell asleep last night, I was literally thinking, how much money how many comics bucks would I be willing to put on the line to get Hickman for an interview? Like, would it be offensive to say to a Jonathan Hickman, look, we'll pay you $1,000 of comics bucks to just do a 2-hour interview with us?
Don't throw that on the public thing. Yeah, he might be watching.
So if he's watching, let's hear his answer.
Let's worry about a Terrificon free one first.
He's not doing a free interview with us. He one of the first things he said in the David Harper interview is that he actively does not do interviews. Like he doesn't like it. So I don't think we'll ever be in a position to get a Jonathan Hickman interview otherwise. He even said, "You're persistent," to David. Like They've been trying to put the interview together for years, and they finally were able to sit down and do it. And that's because they have a relationship. So I don't know, man.
Someday.
I would love it.
There's some interesting people at Terrificon though, Sean.
Yeah, who else?
Scotty Young, Mark Silvestri, John Romita Jr., Kevin Eastman,
Wow.
Chris Claremont, Hermosa Ramos, Steve McNiven, Charles Soule, Terry Moore, Joel Jones. Interesting.
Can't go to San Diego, but maybe you can hit Terrific Con.
King and Jared's too. Jim Starlin. Joe Kelly. Oh, cool. Man,
I just want to say hello to Hickman.
Yeah, that's what I want to do. Yeah. Christopher Priest is gonna be there. Man, we should look into this, dude. Both assignments. We might be able to get a press thing. Might be a little easier for us.
What is it?
August 8th and 10th. We got time. And we get to go to a casino too and get a little see how wild Marco wants to get.
Y'all better hang on to those comics bucks.
Yeah, we are locking them down in New York before we go to Connecticut.
Third Rail said, "You can do it, Sean. You're the enforcer." So, I cannot enforce Jonathan Hickman to do an interview. That's actually illegal. I mean, look, I would love the chance to talk to the man and see if there's a world and a way where he would come on here. And listen, if money would sweeten the pot, I got some bets going. Maybe I can make a little money. Throw it his way.
I'm just saying, we just show up with mics ready. Worth a shot.
I can think of worse ways to spend my time than trying to interview Hickman.
A bag of money.
And I will say, I think there's is it a Michael Jordan steakhouse at Mohegan Sun?
I ate at a Michael Jordan steakhouse in Chicago. It was okay.
Wasn't a slam
Never.
dunk.
It was okay. It wasn't the fucking Michael Jordan of steakhouses.
Fair.
Shu Patel says, I mean, if people like Word Balloon and Comic Pop haven't interviewed Hickman, it's going to be super hard for you guys. But I believe in y'all.
Hey, what the hell?
What the helly?
All right. We got to keep things moving. I was very compelled by the interview, though, and it's worth watching for its own sake. It's an hour, very in depth. I think it was great. I want to briefly talk about Thunderbolts, the movie, and the comic. So, spoilers for Thunderbolts. If you don't know, I mean, Marvel spoiled it themselves last weekend, so like they gave you no fucking chance. But at the very end, they reveal that the real title of the movie is New Avengers, and that's been all over the place now. And so the comics are actually doing the same thing because there was a Thunderbolts book due out that was by Sam Humphries and Tom Lima. We talked about it. It's got Carnage on it. That has now been renamed New Avengers as well. I have no problem, really, with the comic version of that because I think it's fun. And it's not a book that I was going to really care about either way. I think now I'm more likely to buy it for some bizarre reason. The movie one, like I'm not so sure. I'm really talking about like the marketing aspect of the name change. Because they gave people what 2 days to watch it before they spoiled that.
Yeah.
As a purist, that's horseshit. Fuck a comic. They changed it before the name came out, so fine. But the movie, I don't know, man. I don't know. That's kind of screwy.
It's still not. They're still called Thunderbolts on IMDb, so that it's not fully changing the name of it.
Well, no, but it's
Come on, you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's spoiling the big secret of the movie.
Yeah. They gave it 3 days.
Yeah. Okay, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah. That that I have an issue with, but I understand how marketing is, and they want to keep that ball rolling. And like they already ruined that big poster they revealed. Disney had this Thunderbolts poster that was on the side of a building, and then come Monday, it was New Avengers instead of Thunderbolts. It was the Wheaties box thing, and then by Friday, it's all Stitch has ripped through the poster, and now it's a giant Stitch poster.
Hmm.
Like this is just how their marketing works.
They got Sebastian Stan out there ripping
Yeah.
down Thunderbolts posters for New Avengers posters.
Doesn't he have other things to do? Like,
He's getting paid to
He's
do
getting
that.
paid by
Yeah,
Disney. I guess not.
it's part of his
Like,
contract.
oh my goodness. Yeah, I don't know. I see two sides of it. Like maybe this will make the movie do better numbers, but like the first week numbers matter the most.
Yeah.
And that's when you're getting the most of your audience in. So changing it the week after, it's gonna help a little, but it's not gonna prevent them from having the kind of slide that Marvel movies typically have from week 1 to 2. At least I don't think so.
I also just don't see the heat here.
Yeah.
Like the only character here who has any amount of real heat is Bucky. And if you took, an army of what do they call those people? Winter captain shippers.
Yeah.
Stucky,
Like,
Stucky fans.
That alone would beat out the Thunderbolts crowd. Like I just like it feels like they're pushing something that's not going to go anywhere anyway.
It's going to go as far as the next movie, and that's it, or the next Avengers movie. I don't think come Secret Wars there is a new Avengers movie.
That's in 3 years. Like
Yeah. My biggest gripe with it is that it means you'll never get an actual Thunderbolts movie, and it means we'll never get an actual new Avengers movie. It kind of kills the name in two regards. I think the concept of the movie is fine. I think that making them new Avengers is fine in terms of the story, but it loses its title really going forward.
I mean, Gavin is right. I guess it was more about them wanting to be the ones that got the word out rather than audiences. I can certainly see
Sure.
that. But that's a far cry from the Marvel that was saying before Infinity War came out, no spoilers. When No Way Home was coming out, no spoilers. Remember, they went hard to tell people not to spoil the movie, and now they're just doing it themselves. So maybe they're just giving in to the way the world works. Um, I believe in movie magic, and I would love to see them do their best to be a part of that.
but if they're the ones making the movie and the movie magic, they're the ones that get to dictate what it is.
100%.
It doesn't exist anymore.
100%.
Can I ask one quick question, Sean? Kind of like to shift things. You said you're more excited for the new Avengers comic now?
Yeah, weirdly.
Do you know why, or is a gut?
No. I think probably the same thing that Marvel thinks will work for the movie probably worked on me for the comic. Oh shit, it's an Avengers comic. I'm interested.
I mean,
now.
when's the last time you saw that new Avengers logo on a comic?
Dude, it looked good. It looked good. I already know what cover I want. That's how into this I got out of nowhere. Know what cover I want,
dude. I got really into it too. I was like, hell yeah, I like this team. This is an Avengers team. It was not a Thunderbolts team.
Right.
This has the power level of an Avengers team. Carnage, whatever. It's Eddie Brock. But yeah, man, I dig this lineup. Man. Laura Kinney, an Avenger, huh?
Hey,
wild.
Stranger Things, right?
Love it.
Now's a good time to hit the super chat we missed from Hayden from earlier. Sorry, Hayden, but it's just a deviation. Now's the perfect time. Thoughts on Jake Schreier, who directed Thunderbolts, being in talks to direct the new X-Men movie? Also, did anyone read the Two-Face finale? I'm disappointed. So I didn't read Two-Face finale. I dropped that book a long time ago, but I think Jake Schreier potentially being the director sounds wonderful, but directors aren't the total package. And so for me, the writer matters more than the director.
Which, I mean, we praised, I don't have the IMDb page up. Somebody can grab
Eric
it for me.
Pearson.
Who probably will be involved because he's been touching a lot of Marvel stuff. He's like the Marvel guy. And it was a woman. Name a woman.
I'm blanking on her name, unfortunately.
I'm looking it up. Oh, I have it in my history here. Okay. But she was Joanna Kahlo, who worked on it too. And I'm with you, Sean. I think if they can have the creative team, I think some of the direction was fine in this. I think there was some actually like the way the movie was shot, specifically the outdoor scenes. It looked good. It didn't look like we were in a CG. We weren't in Spider-Man's New York City. You know what I mean? Um, so it looked good. So I'm not against that at all. And especially if they can get some of the creative stylings in terms of the writing of this of X-Men. X-Men needs soap opera. Thunderbolts fucking had it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I'm not against that at all.
And none of us read Two Face, right?
It's on my
No.
list. I have it installed. I have it downloaded. I haven't gotten to it yet.
Hound said he did read Two Face, and he said it was pretty good, and it intrigued him where the character is headed.
Okay. Was there any? I highly doubt this, but I'll ask it anyway. Was there any relationship to where Two Face ends up and potentially setting him up to be in Hush 2 at all?
Well,
Is there any connection there? Common Sense with a 4.99. I switched Hulk for Scar since Scar might not be in Imperial. I would switch Laura for Gunna Shervold, aka Troll.
I love Troll.
of course you do.
Troll was in Jeff Parker's Thunderbolts. She was like this
Okay.
adopted little savage girl who gets adopted by like Asgardians or the trolls of Asgard, and it's just crazy, like a kid that bites. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Interesting. Uh yeah, I would like to see that. I don't know who Troll is, but I would like to see that. Fuck it.
Scar is on that same Thunderbolts team with Troll, so they have some history. But that's more of a Thunderbolts lineup. This feels like Avengers. Put Hulk and a Wolverine on the team.
Sure. No, I have not seen that Vine Kurt Wild show. What year is this? You're asking me if I've seen a
Oh,
Vine?
it's ancient. This Vine. It's ancient. This is old Vine lore. It's great.
That's a great one. Yeah.
Because you can hear people in the Barnes and Noble line going, "Oh, what the."
That's fucked up, dude. Spoiling the death of Dumbledore? Um, all right. We've got room for one more topic today. And I think it would be fun to choose which one we're going to talk about. So instead of me choosing, we, the audience, can choose together. So here are your options. Black Cat getting a comic from G. Willow Wilson and Glenn Melnikov. Uh, Jeff Lowell back for some X-Men Apocalypse stuff. And Greg Rucka doing some Cheetah and Cheshire stuff. The Justice in a new Justice League miniseries, and France publishing its own Wonder Woman Harley Quinn graphic novel. Which one?
I
Jeff
think you.
Loeb.
I think you just covered all of it just then. I think we're good.
Those are the headlines.
Yep.
See you next week.
Boom, 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 boom.
I want to talk about the Jeff Loeb one.
Okay.
I'm with you, but
That's
let
my
me
vote.
just show that I did pull a Black Cat cover. I'll just put that on the screen for a little bit. We're not going to talk about it, but let's leave it up there. The SEO, get to see where see where the peak level goes up in the video. I know Hayden's. Oh yeah, Hayden's already going crazy for it. Jeez.
Keep the answers coming, chat. We're gonna actually go based on what you guys say. I am, for what it's worth, G. Willow Wilson on Black Cat is the one of the only things that can get me to read a Black Cat book. So
Yeah. Oh, here's breaking news. Gavin says him and Jeff Lemire are teaming back up for another stab at the Golden Age JSA.
Ooh. Johnny
oh,
Sorrow possibly go back in time.
Listen, that's the biggest news.
okay, I like that.
That is the biggest news. Hot damn.
Gavin, jump on here. Tell us everything.
It looks.
Ooh, let's go.
It looks.
We'll
like
push this. We'll push this show to 4 hours. Don't even think.
It looks like Loeb is the pick though.
Yeah. All right. So we'll talk. We'll dig into the Jeff Loeb piece. So There is a book coming out called X-Men of Apocalypse, and it's going to be a sequel directly to Age of Apocalypse. It's Jeff Loeb and Simone DeMeo, who's doing the art. That's a great, great thing. Always love to see DeMeo's work. It's going to be a 6-issue series, and then there'll be an alpha, omega issue, and then 4 issues in between, which emulates the style of the original. There's going to be a giant size Age of Apocalypse. They are taking that giant sized name and just dragging it and dragging it and dragging it. Here's the solicit. The X-Men of Apocalypse crash into the main Marvel Universe, a dystopian future created when Charles Xavier was killed. Age of Apocalypse is home to a war-torn group of X-Men led by Magneto. In order to free their Earth from Apocalypse's cruel reign, they were willing to sacrifice their very existence, or so they thought. The main timeline was restored, Apocalypse defeated, but their world lived on. Taking place in the direct aftermath of the original crossover's explosive finale, X-Men of Apocalypse reignites the mission of this iconic reality's X-Men as they journey here to ensure their universe's survival. This desperate mission will take them into the main Marvel Universe, where they will come into conflict with their classic counterparts, forever impacting both teams' destinies.
2 questions.
Yep.
Have you guys read Age of Apocalypse?
Yeah, not the full thing because I didn't like it, but I read whatever I read I didn't like because I was like, who the fuck? Who are these people? What's going on? I don't. This wasn't for me.
Yeah, I think I've read bits of it. I don't know if I've read the whole thing.
Yeah. I've never read it. That being said, y'all have any affinity to the Age of Apocalypse version characters?
Nope.
The most I have is AOA Nightcrawler, but that's only because of Uncanny X-Force.
Right. I can't say that I do.
Yeah.
No.
Isn't Dark Beast from this?
He escapes the Age of Apocalypse. Yeah, I believe Dark Beast is one of them. Yeah.
So Dark. Yeah.
I like
Dark Beast. Blink was in Exiles. I like Blink a lot. Blink is great. But that was like an Exiles thing. It was purposely that. It is weird that like it looks like this is Gambit, Sabretooth, Wild Child, Blink, Morph, and Forge.
Yeah.
I think. Which is weird because like literally out of all the Age of Apocalypse characters, all of these guys have action figures at Hasbro. Gambit just got one. Not Forge though. I don't think Forge did. But like there's an affinity for these characters that I don't get. I don't understand. They're cool, I guess. But like, do we need Gavin, forgive me. Do we need another Gambit?
Common sense with a $4.99. Thank you, by the way. Really, really appreciate the super chats today. It doesn't make sense. Isn't most of the Age of Apocalypse characters dead, except Morph and Blink? Did I miss something? I want a new Sam Alexander comic. Look, dude, you are asking whether or not the guy who wrote the original Hush and then wrote a sequel and didn't give a fuck about anything that happened in the 20 years intervening time is going to care about whether or not his new Age of Apocalypse makes sense alongside the old one and the intervening years. The answer is money. That's the answer. Does it make sense? Money.
Yep.
And common sense is right. In terms of Jeff Loeb, I would love Jeff Loeb to tackle Sam Alexander again.
That was good stuff.
That Nova with Ed McGuinness. Oh, that's a shining point of Marvel Now for me.
Yeah.
And I know on the Discord there was a bit of Jeff Loeb haters in the Discord. I don't get it. I mean, okay, I get it, but I also like when Jeff Loeb hits, he fucking hits. You know, we talk about the
when's that coming back around?
Well, I mean, Sean, you're liking Last Halloween, right?
It's fantastic.
Yeah, which he's simultaneously writing a fantastic Batman book and a shit-tastic Batman book at the same time. So he works in extremes for me. There's rarely a middling Jeff Loeb book, in my opinion. There's sometimes a great Jeff Loeb book, and there's sometimes a bad Jeff Loeb book. It's rare that I find one that's like, eh. Even his Red Hulk, I really like. I liked his Hulk run.
Yeah.
The color series. The color series. I mean, you like the color books,
No,
right?
I do. And I was thinking specifically of like Hulk Gray. I think that one's sort of meh. To me, a middling Jeff Loeb book is a forgettable one because it's either incredible or it's just an absolute waste of the paper it's printed on.
It's ultimatum.
Yeah, it's him going off the absolute deep end. But like, Hulk Gray or like the Captain America one, it's just like, who even knew those came out?
Captain
Like
America.
Daredevil Yellow is
Yeah.
the exact same as Spider-Man Blue. So
It's Captain America White, right?
Yeah.
Which is that what we just call Steve Cap?
yeah.
Okay.
Um, I there are certain conversations on Discord that I cannot get involved in because I really, really don't like it when people go on their hate brigades. I think it's really bullshit. And to hate on Jeff Loeb and say that he's not a good writer, it feels like a young thing to think because there's no way that you have read Jeff Loeb's history and think he sucks. That I can't imagine how you could think that.
And
Maybe modern Jeff Loeb isn't lighting your world on fire, and I get that, but come on, dude.
it also loses some context to like what happened to him in real life. You know,
Sure.
the loss of his son, I believe, greatly affected him, and that's why I think Nova is so good because I think that was him kind of that bleeding onto the page a bit. But then there was a whole time where he was in Marvel TV. He was out of comics, really.
Yeah. That's what I was gonna say.
And some people hate him for the Marvel TV stuff. There were allegations of racism during the Daredevil show, um, anti-Asian stuff on his part. And like, look, I don't know the realities of all that. And I'm not here to judge everybody's morality, okay? I'm here to talk comics. And Jeff Loeb's comics, to me, by and large, pretty good. He's got some fucking shitters in there. He does. But I don't believe that hating on creators is the way to go. There are man, listen. We don't need to get into it. There's just no reason for it. There's just no reason for it. Get over yourself. Not liking something is cool. That doesn't mean the person sucks. There's a big, big difference. Um, no Concept said last Halloween is not that good. The first issue was amazing, but it's been downhill from there. To you, I love it. I think it's awesome, and that like even Hush too. Yo, not great. I will read the whole thing, and I'm enjoying myself, despite the fact that I can tell you right now it's not good comics.
That's how I feel with Hush too. It's not good, but fun.
Yeah.
It's the crank of comics.
And what's wrong with that?
I think there should be more of them, to be honest.
No way. This is the crank of comics.
You a big Crank fan? Just like,
listen, I guess I'm gonna defend Crank.
well, here's the thing, Cale. I love Crank.
No, there's got to be something more hardcore that's better than
The Room of
Hush
Comics. Is the Room of Comics more apropos? No, I love the Room.
No, well, there's something worse than Hush Tua. That's the actual room of.
I want to see what the Room of Comics is. If somebody has an idea of what the Room of Comics is, please let me know in the chat.
I think it's your best friend. He knows exactly what it is.
Oh yeah, maybe.
I don't have a connection to the Age of Apocalypse, so the X-Men of Apocalypse does nothing for me. And at a time when I think the X line is critically in need of rejuvenation, this is literally the opposite of that.
Regression.
In a vacuum, I have no problem with this existing. I just think the timing is not ideal because of where the X line is right now.
It's regression, and this almost feels like them doing those side continuity books. But they're saying, well, this one we could actually bring it to the main continuity. Let's take that nostalgia, let's bait that nostalgia, but let's also make it matter to the current story. And you know those blank Gooner covers are gonna hit.
They're going to hit for me. And you make a good point. You make a good point because, hey, look, maybe there are lapsed readers who like Age of Apocalypse that will read this, and because it's crossing over with the mainline X stuff, maybe those people go, huh, okay, I'm going to continue on. And if that happens, I can't criticize that.
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair. Also, is there a 616 morph? I don't think so, right?
Um, I mean, yeah, right?
I
Because
think
isn't
morph is a.
Morph Morph from the TV show is a character that is different from the original Morph, who wasn't was created within 616. No,
I, I
am I
thought
crazy?
I thought the working was that Morph was a TV show creation. They brought into Age of Apocalypse because it was around the time, and like that the blank face chameleon looking Morph.
Yeah. Yep.
That's the Morph we recognize, and it's only been an AOA thing.
Oh, okay.
I could be wrong. I haven't read the book, so I could definitely be wrong.
Interesting. I'm sure someone in chat will know. Kurt Wildshut says, "Yo, am I crazy for this take, or is Simone de Mayo's art hard to decipher? I feel like he uses so many coloring effects that I can't tell what is happening."
Okay,
Go ahead.
I do have a take on this.
Cool.
I think Simone de Mayo's art is interesting. I think it is the craft of it is good, but I feel like the POV is the same every time. It's this weird, almost fishbowl. Look at the cover. It's always this angle,
Yeah.
even on interiors, and I think it's overly lit. The lighting is all over the place for me. It's like, okay, we're not in cyberpunk in every book. I don't think it's. I think it's good. I just have some issues with it that becomes repetitive for me, and it kind of takes me out of the book sometimes. Like it was Batman and Robin that Simone
Yep.
de Mayo was like. I loved Simone de Mayo in what was it? The Ewing book that we liked, the sci-fi
Yeah,
one.
yeah. We only find them when they're
Yes,
dead. Absolutely.
great book for Simone de Mayo. I thought that was great. Bringing him to Batman and Robin, I was like, ooh, I don't like this. It doesn't feel right.
I liked it. I liked it. But I understand where you're coming from. Um, I don't know. This isn't ringing my bell, so to speak. Uh, but I will probably buy this. I probably will.
Are we cucked for X Men? At least you and I.
Dude, I've said nothing else. I've said nothing else on this podcast. I absolutely accept it. That is me.
It's X Men and Spider Man for me. Like I can't not buy the books. Spider Man, I can at least say I'm just gonna do Amazing Spider Man. I'll keep going. X Men, I've read every one of these solo books. I've read every. I think I've read every From the Ashes book, at least one issue.
Yeah.
Huh.
How could you not?
Don't have money.
Well,
That's how. Easy.
This is the reason why I don't.
Jay Sage says, I'm in my late 20s, but these early 20s comic fans are rabid. They don't think and think they know everything about the character they are now. Oh my God, dude, you are fucking speaking my truth right now. This is what I want to say. That's exactly what I want to say.
But my Tyler Reads Comics Twitter account says otherwise.
I don't want to grow up to be that dude, right? Who shits on young people because I think we young people are great and I
The
love
children
their
are our
ideas and shit
future.
like
Yep.
that. Yeah, but like, yo, can you take a beat? Can you pause? Like, can you at least think before you say some of this bullshit?
That's my thing. It's like, especially with the internet, become at least somewhat of an expert on something you want to have an expert opinion on. Like, if you're gonna have an expert opinion on something, you need the expert part first. Which I mean,
You're
I
gonna
guess
have
we don't even need that in the health industry and in the U.S. anymore. So whatever. But
well, I don't even want to say I'm an expert in comics, but like I've been around the block. There are people who say these things that have only been reading. They're as old as I've been reading comics. You know what I'm saying? To say nothing of how long they've been reading them. So it's like, dude, can't you just take a pause? But then again, like when I was 20, I thought I knew everything too. So that's just how it goes, I guess. Um, yeah. Will I be getting all the variants for the Emma Frost series? No, actually, I didn't like the variants that I saw very much. Thought they could have gone harder on the Goon covers. Truthfully,
They gotta edge you for the rest of the series, Sean.
ain't gonna work on me, man. I actually have negative interest in an Emma Frost solo series. Um, as a general rule.
Hmm.
All right, we are tired. We've been at this for a beat. It's
We're
been
not even
almost
done.
4 hours. And we're actually not even done. We have to go record Pals previews. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. It's been a very fun day. I wish we could just chat with you all day because there's comments I'm desperate to respond to right now, but we can't. Um, Sean the Enforcer is not sticking third rail. I'm sorry, dude. I'm the sheriff. You haven't been around here long enough to know, partner, but I'm the sheriff around these
Yeah,
parts.
he's wearing assless chaps right now. You can't even tell.
Yeah, don't make me stand up.
No, please don't. Our monetization needs it.
I'll put on a show you can't even imagine. Third rail.
He'll show you the third.
Yep. Yep. Hit the like button on the way out. Subscribe to the channel if you are somehow not subscribed. Monday is Pals Previews, 1 p.m. Don't miss it. Tuesday, very important. Mark Waid interview. Be there. 6 p.m. Eastern. Make sure you're there from the start because it's only going to be 30 minutes. We don't have a ton of time. We got to make it count. So come hang out with us. If you have questions for Mark, you can submit them, but it's going to be tough to get them in. Super chats, we will always guarantee get in. So I'm not telling you that you have to spend money on us, but if you want to ask a question directly to Mark, that's the only way it's guaranteed to happen. That's the way it goes. Thank you guys again for an amazing stream. Tuesday, hopefully you'll be there. Until then, take care.
See ya.